Hi, I'm Rhiannon, Welsh friend of Odin the dog, and his parents, Kieran and Eilidh. I was just thinking about how great the Generally Spooky History podcast is, and how we should all go and immediately sign up to their Patreon. They really are the best humans I've ever met. Eilidh, so charming, and Kieran's jokes truly are outstanding. I should point out that in no way am I sipping the champagne that they didn't buy me in order to say this. So go ahead. Go over and enjoy the exclusive content and merchandise that you can get your hands on over on the Generally Spooky History podcast.
And relax into the thing that feels completely natural, not completely foreign after taking a break for a bit.
For 2 weeks maybe since we last recorded.
It's not even been that long. It feels like an eternity.
Has been an eternity for those not on Patreon. You haven't heard from us since the start of July.
That's a long time.
That's a long time. And here we are, back for season 6.
Well remembered.
I know the seasons, Eilidh.
Spring.
You beat me to it.
Summer. The best season. And then Christmas.
Those are the seasons.
Yeah.
The 4 seasons. Mm-hmm. That's what the hotel chain's named after.
Yeah, it's spring, summer, Eilidh's birthday, Halloween, Christmas.
Christmas. Easy. Well, here we are.
Yeah, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great.
Season 5's over. Season 6. We're here. We've arrived.
This comes out on the last day of summer. And then it's autumn is here, baby. So we're ready to get cozy. The heat wave is over. That was awful.
Thank fuck.
I'm not built for the heat. And I'm ready to get spooky. Get the dark.
Me too. It's my favourite time of year.
Get the fire on soon.
I have made this an especially spooky season.
Ooh.
It might be our spookiest ever. I've stacked the deck with some super spooky episodes.
For that autumn Halloween goodness.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
One's itching against my chair and it's shaking me.
Earthquake!
Ghost Tremors.
That'd be a good ITV2 10 p.m. movie.
Ghost Tremors. Mm-hmm. Yes, it would.
Or maybe the 11 p.m. movie.
Oh yeah, the one after the main movie.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should play some music and dive into today's episode.
And maybe try and get him to stop tubing.
Maybe do that. It can be like ghostly atmosphere sounds.
No, it's just crunchy.
Bones crunching.
What? Why are you staring at me like that? This week, we're talking about Pool House.
Oh, is that perhaps a haunted house?
Yes, we are kicking off the season with your quintessential haunted house. With a twist.
With a twist?
Yes.
Like a lemon twister?
Starting strong, I see. This is what the people come for. I've heard.
You start as you mean to go on, you know?
I was speaking to one of our friends, Scott, who listens, who was saying that your jokes are fine, but it's the way that I react to them that makes him laugh.
My jokes are fine. I'm insulted, sir.
They're good or whatever, but...
I am a comedic genius, unappreciated in my own time, I'll have you know. Scott. From Scotland.
Well, yes, we're starting with Pool House. Up in Pool U, which is in the Highlands on the west coast. It is part of the North Coast 500, which is extremely popular. So if you've done the route or looked at the route, you will have seen Pool U. And yeah, it's quite near our neck of the woods.
Yeah, I think so. Up on the west coast, that kind of water. Spent a bit of time there growing up and things.
Weirdly, I think it would be easier for you to get to by water from Ullapool than by road.
Yeah, I think so. There's a particularly nasty bit of road going from Pool U to Ullapool. I forget what it's called. It's called like the Fane or something.
Yeah, the Fane. Mm-hmm. That is the bane of my mother's life.
Because it's not a very nice piece of road.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's also known as like Desolation Way or something. It has because of reasons. I don't know.
It's a very Highland approach.
Yes.
I feel. That when we went up to Betty Hill in the summer, which is up near Thurso, right on the north coast, we came home in a really weird way.
Yeah,
we followed a really weird route. And we got to the end of it. We rejoined the A9, which is like the main road through the Highlands. And I was telling my dad, just like, that was weird. Like, we went on this really, like, small road that we shouldn't have been on. It was just a path.
Well, because it was a path, because there was grass growing down, like, the middle furrow.
We shouldn't have had the car there. And then I was talking to Dad about it, because he's driven most places. And his response, he was totally calm and chill. He went, "Oh, that'll be the corkscrew road." I'm like, why? Why does that exist?
What do you mean? And then he whipped out Google Maps and found it, like, is it here? Is this where you rejoin? I'm like, yeah, it is.
Yes.
Like, oh, yeah.
Just rejoin the A9 just outside Brora. And he said it like it was nothing. "Oh, that'll be the corkscrew." What are you saying?
Such a weird thing, isn't it? Anyway, yes, a haunted house. What better way to kick off a spooky season?
And I'm going to leave a little teaser here if you're new so that you listen to the whole episode. Because I've heard that's what you should do.
Okay.
You tease the big finale. Kieran saw a ghost.
I saw something. I saw something at the house.
If you know anything about Kieran, the fact that he just said that should have you screaming.
Yeah, because we got to go to Pool House and did a tour, which was excellent. And yeah, we'll talk about that towards the end. Eilidh was scared, obviously.
You saw a ghost! Of course I was fucking scared. What are you saying? Oh, well, we'll start with the history.
Yes.
And then we'll get to the ghosts.
Sounds great to me.
I guess. Well, if we're going to talk about Pool House, we can't not talk about Clan Mackenzie. Their history is really intermingled and interwoven with the house and the surrounding area. They were the clan that owned the area around Gairloch for a very long time. And that's part of the reason that the script was so confusing to put together, because I was trying to decide where to begin and what to include, because we could talk about Clan Mackenzie or we can talk about Pool House.
Yes.
And they sort of meet each other at different points. But I've tried to keep it strictly to the house, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about Clan Mackenzie.
Sounds good to me.
If it suits you. We'll start in the 1300s with the origins of Clan Mackenzie. We're back, baby.
We'll keep it strictly to the house. So this is how Clan Mackenzie formed.
I'm actually not taking criticism at this time.
You know, on the feedback stage.
I'm not in the feedback stage of the episode.
I see. Well, then I will just let you continue. How does that sound?
I would enjoy that. That's all I ever want. I just never get it. They supported Robert the Bruce, and they did pretty well from being on his side during the Wars of Independence. And then later that century, they were fighting a lot with the Earl of Ross, which we've talked about in other episodes. So that's kind of when they found their power, which led to them owning the land around Pool House for so long.
Got you.
Which is why I bring it up, if you must know.
I was curious.
We've talked a little bit about them fighting with the Earls of Ross in other episodes. I think in our Dunrobin episodes and Elin Donnan. So if you want to hear more about that, you can go there. In the 1400s, we had Alexander Mackenzie of Kintail, who was the young boy who was part of all the chiefs who answered the summons of King James I to Inverness. And along with these other chiefs and important figures, he was duped, basically, because lots of them were murdered or put in jail.
Yep.
Under this ruse of the summons. But Alexander Mackenzie was forced to go to school down in Perth. Yes. Rather than being executed or imprisoned.
I remember that.
So we've talked about him before. So this is part of this Mackenzie line. And because he was given this chance and because he wasn't beheaded, he greatly improved Mackenzie interests over his lifetime. He sided with King James over the Lord of the Isles, who held power to the west.
A bold choice when you're so close to the Isles.
Yes, but they were close to the Isles, but they weren't necessarily friendly. The MacDonalds, who were traditionally the Lords of the Isles, often attacked Mackenzie land because they were the closest on the mainland.
Yep.
So just because they were close, they weren't necessarily friendly.
Yeah.
But he chose to side with King James, which ultimately ended pretty well for him and flipped the balance of power from the MacDonalds to the Mackenzies.
The Mackenzies are kind of everywhere, aren't they? It's even a really popular surname, isn't it?
Well, in the West, where we grew up, not necessarily everywhere.
Oh, well, that's true, actually, yeah.
It was for us, but different in other parts of Scotland.
Yeah.
But the area sort of around Ullapool, mainly around Gairloch, has always been Mackenzie land.
I'm with you.
So that's the very brief origins of the clan. That's how they found power. That's how they got their foothold where they are.
Yes. That brought them to the area surrounding our fated
Pool house.
pool house. Yeah, I don't know. I was going to try and make it dramatic. It didn't work.
One of Alexander's sons was called Hector Roy Mackenzie. And he's really the main reason we're talking about the Mackenzies in relation to Pool House.
Okay.
He was a very powerful man and was the one who eventually gained possession of Gairloch, like the estate of Gairloch, not just the town, which is also on the west coast. You'll drive through it on your way to Poolhew. It's a nice place. Recommend, is it the Black Pearl Creole Kitchen?
Ooh, yes, in Gairloch. Delicious Jamaican food. Surprisingly. Superb.
Hector had all of it. It was an absolutely massive estate, as we'd refer to it now, but it wouldn't have been called an estate at the time. Hector caused a few problems because during his lifetime he effectively nipped in and stole Eilidh Donan Castle from his nephew and then wouldn't give it back.
Cheeky.
Issues with succession and all kinds of things, which we talked about in that episode. This is the same Hector that we talked about then. Now, I read that Hector was described in the usual Highlander fashion. If you imagined a Highlander warrior, Hector is who you would think of.
Big, bearded, ginger.
Literally, yes.
Nice.
All of those things. The only addition was that he was reckless. Some would say heroic, but he was quite, I guess, what's the word? Like
Daredevil?
I can't think. No, like where you rush into things. Or you have a temper and it pushes you to do things without thinking. You go head first into stuff.
Yep.
He was kind of that way.
Got you.
But yeah, he was massive, super strong, red-headed, all of that. So exactly what you imagined.
Not unlike myself. Apart from all of the above, obviously.
And Kieran's been bulking in between seasons. He's going to start a bro Instagram account.
Bulking.
Kieran the Chad.
I don't want to be Kieran the Chad. That's the last thing I want to be, I think. I don't know. I've been lost in internet slang. Anyway.
So through various things that he did, which we've talked about in other episodes, Hector was given the lands around Gairloch. But it wasn't very easy for him to take control of them.
Oh, I see.
So he owned them, they belonged to him, but he came into conflict with Clan MacLeod when he actually tried to claim them.
Yes. I mean, it's the thing, isn't it? If it doesn't belong to you and you give it to someone else, the people who are already there are going, up yours. Why would we just listen to you now?
That, and you have somewhat traditional clan rivalries, which have typically gone on longer than a monarch has been on the throne.
That's true.
The story I'm about to tell you will probably sound familiar if you've listened to the Eilidh Donan episode, but bear with me.
Okay. I'm on the edge of my seat. Hey, Philip.
The chief of Clan MacLeod, Alan McRory or MacLeod, I read both, had married one of Hector's sisters. She apparently wasn't important enough to record her name anywhere. At least not ones I had access to.
Well, I mean, she was Hector's sister. What more do you need to know?
If only she'd had a penis, we could have known her name.
If only.
Alan's brothers, the guy who had married Hector's sister, were not impressed at who he'd chosen to marry because they hated the Mackenzies.
Yep.
They didn't want the next chief of Clan MacLeod to be a Mackenzie in any way, which they would be because Alan and Hector's sister had children.
Yes.
And they were in line to inherit.
So it'd be his uncle would be a Mackenzie. Is that right?
Whose uncle?
They didn't want the person in charge to be anything to do with Mackenzies.
Yeah, so Alan's children were half Mackenzie.
Yeah.
And they didn't like that. Luckily, Alan's brothers had a pretty elegant solution to this problem.
Is it murder?
Yeah, kill Alan and his 2 sons that he had with his Mackenzie wife.
Easy peasy. Why don't more people think of that?
It's just so simple.
If someone's a problem, you just murder them.
Yeah.
Then there's no repercussions ever. So
yeah, like it's probably fine.
Yeah, right.
Well, this is exactly what they did. It was really quite gruesome, and it happened across the area around Pool U, which is why we're talking about it.
Oh.
Again, there are a couple of versions of events. This is just what happens all of the time. In one version, Hector's sister is dead, and Alan has remarried.
Got ya.
And he's had additional children with his second wife, who his brothers favoured over the Mackenzie boys.
Yep.
In another version, the one that we heard on the tour of Pool House, was that Hector's sister was still living when her children were killed.
Yes.
Alan hadn't remarried.
That's the version I recall.
Yes. On the tour, Liz, who did a wonderful job, said that Alan and Hector's sister lived near Loch Tolly, which is about 2.5 miles from Pool U. Alan's brothers came to the mainland from Lewis, which was MacLeod land, and came upon Alan sleeping on the banks of the River U. And they beheaded him.
Oh. It's just always a bit grim, isn't it?
So super chill. Like, this
chill.
is totally fine. They tossed the head into a burn, which fed into the River U and washed it away into the loch. And that was when they came for Alan's sons.
Oh. No.
Alan's brothers dragged the boys out of Pool U and away from their mother, along the road to Gairloch, the town this time, but killed them on the way before they reached the town. And they buried them, quote, at the base of a large rock face, unquote.
I'm surprised they buried them, to be honest.
Well, they have to hide what they did.
Ah, that makes more sense.
Because it's still murder.
Yeah.
But they weren't completely thorough about this job. They made a big mistake when it comes to trying to get away with a murder. What do you not want to do if you're trying to get away with murder?
Be seen.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yep.
Anything else you should probably not do?
You shouldn't keep the murder weapon. That's a pretty crucial step. Not tell people. I think that's another one. That's if I was going to murder someone. Those are 3 steps I would take.
Simple things. You probably also shouldn't keep the bloodstained shirts of the boys that you've murdered.
Well, that seems so obvious. I didn't feel the need to say it.
But if you've listened to our Eilidh and Donald episode, this might be where some bells are ringing for you as to why this is familiar. Hector's sister, the boy's mother, realised that her family were gone. She couldn't find her husband, she couldn't find her children, and something must be really wrong. She had the help of a servant who really went above and beyond, in my opinion, given he's in service of the family. He tracked down Alan's brothers, following the word of people that they had told about the murders.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. And they had even shown these people the blood-stained shirts.
Oh.
That proved what they had done.
Why? Why would you do that? Why? Ugh. Tell you what, that's some just brazen attitudes. If you think you can do all that, but you're not worried about like people finding out or repercussions.
It reminds me a lot of like big names you get in like the world of celebrity and media who brag about like the way they treat women.
Yeah.
Or things they've done to women because they know nothing will happen.
Yeah, what's going to happen? How they're going to come for me? Yes. Yes, they are. They always do. You jackass.
That's what that attitude reminds me of.
Yeah, it's just that kind of untouchable thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know, I can talk about what I want because, nothing's going to happen to me. That's what they were doing.
Gross.
But the servant of the Mackenzies managed to follow the brothers to an inn that they were staying at and managed to steal the boys' shirts back.
Oh, shit.
So he has stolen the proof of what these men had done.
Oh, goddamn.
And I'm assuming they kept the shirts to take back to Lewis to prove that they had done the deed.
Oh, that makes sense. I thought it was just you don't waste good cloth.
They didn't try to clean it. They kept them bloodstained. So I think it's to prove that they did what they're bragging about doing.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So the servant returns, and Hector's sister, I hate calling her Hector's sister, but I don't have a name.
Should we just give her a name?
Julie.
Julie.
Julie was heartbroken at receiving the shirts of her children. But it was with these shirts that she got the help of her brother, Hector.
Ah.
He took these shirts down to Edinburgh himself. And it was using these shirts and the story of his murdered nephews that Hector received a commission of fire and sword from King James III. King James III himself.
Oh, it's still the coolest thing ever. Since the first time it came up, the Commission of Fire and Sword. Oh.
And that's why we talked about it in our Eilidh Donnan episode.
Yes. Badass.
In another version, it's Alan's second wife who witnesses the murders happening of her stepchildren. And she brings the shirts to Alexander Mackenzie, Hector's father.
Okay.
And then Alexander sends Hector on his mission. So that's quite nice because it's a stepmother who cares about her stepchildren.
That's nice to hear, isn't it?
Goes against a lot of negative stereotypes about step-parents.
Plot twist. The servant did it. That's how he gets his hand on the bloody shirts.
Interesting.
That's my conspiracy theory.
On the tour, and the reason I talk about it again in this episode, Liz had a map showing the places where these things are supposed to have happened, which was wild. And she was able to tell the story in so much more depth than I had known when we did our first episode. So I wanted to talk about it again.
Hell yeah.
And it's also relevant here because this is partly how Hector took possession of Gairloch. Because the MacLeods were forced out after this.
Oh, well, that makes sense, doesn't it?
They were hunted out of Gairloch. Partly because of this fire and sword, but also just the clan weren't tolerating them anymore for what they had done.
Yeah, that was a last straw.
To the boys.
The boys.
Now, some of the MacLeods were hanged at Kinlochewe, about 25 miles inland from Poolew.
Got you.
And others ran away to Skye to try and escape the Mackenzies because they were out for blood.
Yes.
But apparently, some of the MacLeods were betrayed by a witch at Dunvegan Castle.
You want me? That was a plot twist. She outed them.
Now, Dunvegan is a location that deserves its own episode. You've probably heard about it before if you're interested in Scottish folklore. Dunvegan Castle and the fairy flag, which is new to Kieran, I can tell.
Yeah, that's brand new information to me.
But you might know the story. We're not talking about it today. Just put a pin in it.
Put a pin in
that
it.
thought.
Okay.
The witch at Dunvegan told them that if the MacLeods sailed back to Gairloch in a specific type of ship, I saw some of the details, but I didn't understand them because ships are hard for me. We've been talking about this a lot over the past few weeks.
Eilidh's not shipwright, she's a ship wrong.
I am a ship wrong. But if they sail back to Gairloch in this specific type of ship, they would be able to take back all the lands that the Mackenzies had taken from them.
All right.
So the MacLeods were keen to try and do this with the knowledge that they'd be safe and they'd be able to take back what was rightfully theirs.
It has been prophesized, so.
They did what she said, but realised too late that she had just lied.
Oh.
Because ultimately, it didn't matter what ship they sailed in on. The Mackenzies saw them from the mainland because they're sailing towards them.
If you sail towards a coastal town, someone's going to see you.
And the Mackenzies fired on them from shore.
Well, as you would.
With bow and arrow. And only 2 MacLeods survived the encounter.
Oh, that cheeky bint.
Just lied.
Just lied. Just went, you're terrible people. I'm not helping you.
No, definitely sail back. It'll be fine.
No, that would be great. Don't even worry. I think they should have worried more.
Yeah. Or just use common sense.
Yes.
Common sense would have served them well here.
Just be like, do you think that'll actually work? I'm like, well, this woman we've just met said it, so obviously.
Wouldn't kill them to be a bit more skeptical.
Yeah.
Killed them not being skeptical enough.
Just get an extra thought in their head.
But the legends go that all the MacLeods were buried along that part of the shore on the mainland near Poolew.
Interesting. I'm with the person who was beheaded and it was thrown into Loch Tolly.
It was into a burn that fed into River Ewe.
Yes.
But they lived by Loch Tolly.
Okay, my apologies. But it's a weird thought that there could be just skulls in the bottom of these lochs and things.
Oh, there 100% are remains in every single loch.
Yeah, because there has to be.
100%.
Really. But they'd just be too deep to check. And they tend to be very peaty and muddy and stuff, so you wouldn't be able to find them. And to what end would you find them?
With the cold temperature, they may be quite well preserved. Oh yeah, 100%.
Grim.
Yeah.
I swim in these lochs.
Oh no. Hector is important to the history of Poole House because he's the one who took ownership of Gairloch.
Let me guess. He needed somewhere to hang his hat.
That's not where I was going with it.
No?
No.
Oh.
The existing Gairloch estate today is still owned by his descendants.
Wow.
500 years later.
That's impressive.
It's one of the only parts of Scotland, or there. It's like I haven't done this in such a long time. I feel like a twat. The Gairloch estate is the. Why are you laughing?
Which is really funny.
No part of Scotland has been held by the same family for such a long time. Is what I'm trying to say. It's taken me like 5 attempts.
Well, it makes sense because that's a really long time when there's always feuding, a lack of sons. And yeah, just to have held it that long, quite impressive. It's quite impressive. So, did they build the house?
We're going to get there.
Okay.
I think the Commission of Fire and Sword was granted in the 1480s or the 1490s. And Hector died in 1528.
Nice.
So that's where we are. And now it's 500 years later, Mackenzie still own Gairloch.
Fair play.
Hector's son, John, had Gairloch forfeited for a time.
Okay.
Because he chose not to fight at the Battle of Pinkie.
Oh.
And the Earl of Sutherland took control of Gairloch.
But did he get it back then?
We're going to get there.
Okay.
You keep jumping the gun. Let me tell my story.
I'm sorry.
And I say that the Earl of Sutherland took control, but he kind of just wished that he had been able to take control.
Ah, I see.
Because if you didn't know, the land around Poole Ewe and Gairloch is very remote, even by today's standards. So back then, the mid-1500s, it was a different matter altogether. So the Earl struggled to maintain control over Gairloch, even though he owned it, because he just didn't have enough men.
Ah, that makes sense. That's a fair way to come from Sutherland across to patrol an area that you've been given, you know? It's the same problem from before.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm in charge now. Who are you? Fuck you. No, you're not. Then it's problems from there.
When this has historically been Mackenzie land.
Yep.
They're not having it.
No.
So yeah, he just didn't have the men. And it was a very difficult journey to try and...
You know, he just got spam called.
Fuck off! Not a single thought in this head.
That's the fear of having to answer the phone.
We'll just move on, will we?
I think we got the gist.
Unfortunately, I think John, Hector's son, was murdered at Eilidh. And then it was covered up by Mary, Queen of Scots.
Oh my god.
I read that he was either poisoned or starved.
Mazza? She was one of the good ones.
Can't handle that. Yeah, he was either poisoned or starved. And I was thinking how gutted you'd be if it was both.
Oh, that would be a damn shame. Here's one more meal for you, you poor thing.
Go on, get it down, yeah.
Have a bite of the apple.
I think this was in 1550 by this point. John's son, Hector, inherited and was killed. And then his brother, Alexander, was assassinated.
Oh my god.
So, chieftainship of Clan Mackenzie passed to John Roy Mackenzie, 4th of Gairloch. And he kept up all the feuding with the MacLeods, so his ancestors would have been very proud of him.
Good. It's good to keep these traditions alive.
Yes. So now we're into the 1600s. And over this time, Poole Ewe, the town, has been growing and becoming a very important port in the west.
That is madness to me because it's so tiny.
But
Today.
it was extremely important.
Yeah.
One of the reasons for this is that it's the closest point on the mainland to the Isle of Lewis. So it was common for cattle drovers to move their cows between the two from Poolew.
That can't have been an easy task.
No.
But that makes sense if it's the narrowest point. And it is in a nice little bay, Poolew.
Well, yeah, there's the Sea Loch. It's on the banks of Loch Ewe.
So it would be a good place to do it.
Yeah, so you get all your cows on your boat. Ship them out. Although I did read that it was apparently common practice that once they got into the loch, they just kicked the cows off the boat and they swam to shore.
Ah, now that makes more sense.
You just push them off. You can swim back.
That's one way to steer them in.
Oh my god. You look so happy right now and I hate it. Love that stupid face. In 1610, there was an iron furnace in Poolew.
Oh.
Did you know that?
I did not know that.
They took iron ore from places down in England because it was more economical for them to ship it to Poolew to smelt it than to send it to somewhere in England.
Damn.
So they took it up north on ships.
That makes more sense. I was thinking of taking it over land. Like, that would be so difficult.
No. Up the coast.
That makes more sense. People in Poolew should have charged more.
Well, what's terrible is I read that the reason it shut down fairly quickly after it started running and becoming successful is because there was no more trees left to power the furnace.
Ooh, that's a shame.
It's like the destruction of Isengard in real life.
I was just thinking that. Oh my god. Oh.
So it was this hub for a little while, but they cut all the trees down and then went, there's nothing else to burn.
No more fuel. Because they're really smart enough not to burn the children. They thought that through.
I mean, they might have considered it.
Yeah.
You know, the really shitty ones.
Yeah, the wee shitbags.
Now, I also read that the Mackenzies were granted another commission of fire and sword.
Another one?
In 1672, and it was also against the MacLeods.
Well, old traditions die hard.
So they really hated each other.
Yeah.
Really out to get each other.
Jesus.
In 1677, a man called Reverend Kenneth Mackenzie owned the land around Poolew, which seems to include the land that Poole House now sits on.
Oh.
So he's in possession of it, this pocket.
We're getting there.
Yes. But it's not until 1775 that something resembling Poole House is plotted on a map.
Well, it's a much newer building if you go and visit it, which you can and you should if you're passing. It's definitely a house, not a castle.
Well, it's been renovated a lot. In the Victorian era, they changed a lot.
Because thinking of Haddo House. Is that a ruin? I can't remember now.
No.
No, yeah, Haddo House feels more castle-y than Poole House does. I think, looking at pictures.
I guess a bit.
Maybe not. Am I just lying? I might just be lying. Quick, editing Kieran, cut this out. You sound like an idiot.
The Poole House has gone through several versions, iterations. So now it looks more in keeping with the Victorian fashion, but it seems like it might have looked a bit different back in the 1700s. It was a different shape building. The house now, there was a big section knocked down.
Oh, okay.
As I understand.
Well then, never mind. Please continue.
At this point, 1700s, it was the Londu Inn. But the building's included on a map that's dated 1775, along with the smithy that was built next door, the blacksmiths. And there were inns on both sides of the River Ewe at this time, because the only way to cross the river was by boat.
That's a big river. Damn.
Well, it's not the biggest river, but it's really fast flowing.
Oh.
The River Ewe is pretty dangerous. And it was far safer to use the boat to cross it than trying to do it yourself.
That makes sense.
But because you were dependent on boat crossings, you quite often needed somewhere to stay.
Yep.
So there were inns on either side of the river.
Well, if you went after a particularly heavy bout of rain, what could you do?
I mean, we went in August. Yeah, August. And it was fast flowing. And there hasn't been a lot of rain.
And Liz mentioned it's been slowed down. they purposefully slowed it down for fishing.
So I could see the danger there.
Yes. Which was something she mentioned very casually, and I thought was amazing, that they slowed down a river on purpose to make the fishing better. That seemed insane to me, but anyway.
I suppose if she's living there, it's a thing.
It's a thing that happened.
That's what happened. I look at it every day.
I've been taking notes for the blether.
You've forgotten how this podcast works.
Oh, good gracious me.
Now, we're in the period where the clearances were beginning to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And Hector Mackenzie, 11th of Gairloch, is in charge of Mackenzie land. Scandal, he had 3 children with his housekeeper.
Oh my God. Mm-hmm. He's who Arnold Schwarzenegger was taking after. He just had 1 though.
His wife was a woman called Christian Henderson. She was known as the Red Lady. And he was known as the Bucktooth Laird.
The Bucktooth Laird.
Mm-hmm.
That's a shame.
It's not good, is it?
It's not good. I'd rather be the Red Lady.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm razzing on him a little, but Hector, as chief of Clan Mackenzie, was one of the only landowners across the Highlands who opted not to evict and uproot his tenants in favour of sheep during the clearances.
Wow.
Which is part of the reason that the population stayed higher in and around Gairloch than in other places. Because people were able to stay.
That's interesting. Because I feel as you're driving along there are a lot more little pockets of people.
It's because they never left.
Yeah.
He and his sons, quote, refused to evict a single tenant despite the estate running at a loss, unquote.
Wow. That's fair play.
So I'm razzing on him a bit, but, he's doing the bare minimum.
Old Bucktooth is all right.
Big boy Bucktooth.
Big boy Bucktooth. See, I wondered, because one of the ships that took people from the west coast of Scotland to Canada was called the Hector. So I wondered if it was going to be his ship, or a ship named after him.
Does this mean I'm going to have to look at more ships to figure this out?
I think so. I'll put it for the blether.
Oh, but I'm a ship wrong.
I'll look it up.
Interesting, I hadn't put those together.
Because they made a commemorative one a little while ago in Liverpool called the Wee Hector.
Oh, the anniversary of the Hector crossing was this year, I think. 250 years.
Interesting.
I think. I might have that wrong. I need to check.
We can have a little look for the blether.
But yeah, they didn't evict their tenants. We talked about the Highland clearances a little bit in our Dunrobin episodes. But they didn't do that.
That is fair play. You don't hear that very often, so that's nice to hear.
The first innkeeper of Poole House seems to be recorded in 1805, 1806. A man called Donald MacGregor and his wife, Mary McRae.
That's my mum.
It's your mum's name.
And she was a B&B proprietor. Oh my God.
And chef, an all-round amazing person.
Yes.
Not that I have any skin in the game in ensuring that your mum hears me compliment her all the time.
I should listen to this podcast. Hi, Mum.
I didn't even think about that. Oh my God.
I see you over there.
They didn't stay in Poole indefinitely. They actually moved to Cape Breton in Canada. Apologies if it's Cape Breton. I'll say both, so I don't upset you. And travelling to Canada was a very common emigration pattern with Highlanders, like you were just saying.
So they went from innkeepers to outkeepers.
Yes.
Yes. Well, that's fun. I don't know much about the emigrations to Canada.
Something we could look at.
Only that there's a small town somewhere in the north, east coast of Canada that has like a connection to Ullapool apparently. And I think they also have something about the Hector.
It'd be interesting to look at the link. From 1807 to 1820, the innkeeper was a man called Colin MacDonald. And after that, quote, the tenant of the inn of Poole House with its attached 10 acres of excellent arable land and pasturage for 6 cows and their followers in the common by or common grazing, unquote.
That's all right. That's a pretty good deal.
So he was the innkeeper and then he was the tenant of the land, which I'm fairly certain is different.
Yeah, I guess he then hired an innkeeper.
Or he became like a tenant farmer.
Yeah, of the land surrounding. Did you know if you put a piece of fence round common grazing land and nobody challenges it for 10 years, it's yours.
I did know this, but I'm assuming that wasn't meant for me.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily meant for you. It wasn't framed for you.
After Colin, a man called Roderick was in charge of Pool House, but he was a very naughty boy because in 1829 he hadn't paid his rent to the factor.
Oh.
So the factor started looking for another tenant to take his place.
I mean, if you've already not thrown all your tenants out to replace in the sheet.
Sheep. Sheet.
Sheep.
Oh, sheet.
Not sheet.
Oh, sheet.
Then you're going to be pretty pissed that they're then not paying their rent.
Yeah, and the factor is kind of the manager of the estate.
Yes.
If you can call him that. You have the landowner, but a factor would be the one who organises collecting all of the rents and making sure the day-to-day running goes smoothly.
Yeah, he makes it happen, doesn't he?
Yeah, usually. So yeah, Roderick wasn't paying his rent. Mm-hmm. So the factor went, well, I'm going to get someone who pays the rent.
It's fair enough. It's fair enough. When you're doing your calculations, you got to factor it in.
You're on fire.
You love it.
I said earlier that Reverend Mackenzie and his family owned the land around Pooleu.
Yes.
They owned it from 1677 to 1830. So a long time. But in 1830, the Seaforth Mackenzies bought the land back.
Oh, okay. Bought it back. That's fair. That's fair.
So it was always Mackenzie, but now it's in the hands of the laird of Clan Mackenzie, the Seaforth Mackenzies, who we've talked about before.
Yes.
From what I can tell, the Seaforth Mackenzies came about after the chief of Clan Mackenzie received the Earl of Seaforth title in the 1600s.
Yep.
But I might have that completely wrong. So the land around Pooleu is owned by the chiefs once again.
Yes.
Around this time, Francis Mackenzie, the 12th of Gairloch, was the man in charge. He'd been married twice, and he had 3 sons, 2 with his first wife, Scythe Caroline.
Scythe.
It's Cythe.
Unusual.
Kythe.
Maybe. Don't know.
And he had his youngest son with his second wife, Mary Osgood Hanbury. Francis was not the most responsible landowner and accrued massive debts during his time in charge of Gairloch.
What is it about rich people being able to just accrue so much debt and not have any money?
Yeah.
But still somehow be wealthy at the same time?
It's a broken system, because I feel like that still happens.
Yeah. Doesn't make sense.
The debts were so bad that he, his second wife and youngest son all lived in France for a while because he just couldn't hack it anymore. They had to get away.
Oh, goddamn, that is bad.
He was under so much pressure. His brother, Dr. John Mackenzie, kept things running while Francis was gone. But I think one of his debts would equate to about 800 grand today.
That's hefty.
So he was deep in the hole.
Oh no.
And he couldn't handle it.
Yep.
What Dr. John didn't know was that he would never give the reins back to Francis.
Oh.
Because Francis had a pretty severe mental breakdown because of the pressure of his debt. And he spent the last years of his life in a, quote, mental institution in London.
That's a shame.
Unquote.
Financial pressure will do that to you, though.
Yeah, he was not a well man. It had a very serious impact on his mental health. So Mary, his second wife, had to look after all 3 boys herself.
Tough.
2 boys from his previous marriage. And so she and Dr. John, her brother-in-law, ran the Gairloch estate together.
Oh, okay.
From then on.
Sounds pretty good. So then did it go to one of the sons?
Yes. Francis's eldest son, Kenneth, succeeded his father in 1843.
Yes.
But Mary and Dr. John ran it for him for a while because he was only 11 when his dad died. And this isn't Mary's son.
Yep.
But it's Francis's eldest son.
Well, that's nice of her. And, I mean, she may love them all equally, but if she cares more about her own sons, it's still in their best interest to help him run it properly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's quite nice that nobody tried to swoop in and steal it from him since he was so young.
No, it doesn't seem that way. At least from the outside, it seemed like they just ran the estate as it was supposed to be run.
Nice.
Acknowledging that he was going to take it on eventually. Before this, what was happening in the background while all of this debt and terribleness was happening. In 1834, Colin MacDonald had been pursued in court by the Seaforth Mackenzies to have him removed from Pool House.
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe they did it again in 1841.
Oh my God.
And I think it's over unpaid rent.
Yeah.
So they're trying to kick him out. And then from 1841, a man called Facker Kennedy became the tenant of the Pool U Inn, which I believe was Pool House.
I think that makes sense. I remember the first time hearing Facker as a name and not believing it was actually a real name. I thought I was being someone was swearing at me.
If you're unfamiliar, Facker is spelled Farquhar.
It's fairly common up in the Highlands, at least.
It was in 1850, 7 years after the death of her husband, Francis, that Mary moved into Pool House to live there.
That's nice.
And she moved in along with her son, Osgood Hanbury Mackenzie.
Osgood. That's another unusual name.
It is odd, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'd ever heard it before.
No, that's brand new.
Now, she was only 38 at the time. She was a very young widow, which it does kind of change my perspective on her a little bit, because that would be really hard.
That would be hard.
To be widowed with 3 boys in your 30s.
Yeah. As a couple of people approaching their 30s rapidly. That sounds tough.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens later makes me really dislike Mary Hanbury.
Oh no.
She's not a nice person. But this changed my perspective, because that would be difficult.
That would be tough. Makes me want to say her name just like Mary Hanbury.
Or I suppose she was Mary Hanbury Mackenzie.
Mary Hanbury Mackenzie. It's because it sounds like Thornbury. Nigel Thornbury.
The census records show them living at Pool House, but it seems like Francis's other sons weren't living there.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if they were old enough that they were off doing their own thing, or they were away at school, because you'd be in the right era for that. But
yeah.
It was just Mary and her son Osgood who were living at Pool House. So now it's a private residence.
A private dwelling.
Mary seems to have been living there until 1861, because then the census shows that Anne and William Morrison were living there.
Okay.
A woman and her son, who may have been the housekeeper and the gamekeeper. So they're living there looking after it for the Mackenzies.
Yeah.
In 1862, Mary bought the estate of Inverewe and Kernsary,
Fair play.
which neighboured Pool House. It's only a couple miles away. And she bought them for Osgood.
Just as a gift? God damn.
She bought him an estate.
That's what I'd like for my 30th, please.
You think I can do that?
A neighbouring estate to our current estate.
Oh, so you don't even want a first estate. You want a second estate for your birthday.
Yes. The first estate can be from you for your birthday.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Further to that, she bought him this estate, and by this time he's about 20. She also helped him build Inverewe House, which was another big Victorian mansion.
Okay.
And Mary and Osgood stopped living at Pool House and moved into Inverewe.
Yeah. There's you'll probably get to it later, but there's Inverewe Gardens, or like just across the water a little bit from Pool House.
Yeah, Inverewe House is part, or was part of that.
Interesting.
Rather
Inverewe than me.
After Mary and Osgood stopped living there, Pool House was rented by several different people. Just they still owned it, but were renting it out to shooting parties and things.
Oh yeah.
But I want to spend just a little bit of time with Osgood. He was not Francis's eldest son, if you remember.
Nope.
He was his third son, so he kind of had to make his own way, because he wasn't going to inherit anything from his father's estate.
Yes.
Kenneth's children would inherit. So Osgood decided to attempt the impossible. He decided to plant a garden on the banks of Loch Ewe.
Oh.
If you've seen the area, you know it's not the easiest environment to cultivate and grow a lush garden.
No, rocky, exposed to the elements. Quite extreme temperatures of cold.
It comes across as being quite a harsh environment, although it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
But it paid off, you can go and visit Inverview Gardens to this day, like you just said.
You can indeed.
It was the most visited destination for Victorian tourists in the UK at one point.
Wow.
It was insanely popular.
That's wild.
And he started the garden in 1862 with the help of his mother. So I'm assuming he went to her with this idea and she bought him the estate so that he would have something to live off.
Yeah. Well, that's fair play. That's quite a bit of marketing there to have it the most visited again because it's so far away.
Yeah. But people were keen.
Mm-hmm. Go and see a garden.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
you can still go see a garden.
I've been to see it. That was a good day out when I was growing up. Across Inverview Gardens.
I have a little bit about the gardens for you if you'd like to hear.
I would love to hear that.
Within the entire 50-acre area he had in mind for the garden, there was just one tree, a 3-foot-high dwarf willow. Soil imported from Ireland was carried in by basket. Vast numbers of trees were planted for shelter, and very, very slowly, Am Placard became Inverview Garden, a series of themed gardens home to plants from all around the world linked by a maze of plants. A bare rocky headland was transformed into the Eden that visitors find today.
Wow. That's quite incredible, because it's one of those things that's just, well, it's Inverview Gardens. I never really thought about it much more than that, and I haven't been since I was little. But I never really thought about the implausibility that it exists there of all places.
Mm-hmm. And he started with a tree.
A tree.
And I thought it was interesting that he started by just planting lots of trees to create the shelter, so then he could cultivate the plants.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Very clever.
Mm-hmm. Now, initially, when I was putting the script together, I thought Osgood was a pretty good guy.
Yep.
The quintessential Highland gentleman, interested in plants, chill. But my opinion is quite different now.
Is he actually Osbad?
Yeah, he's very Osbad.
Oh, no.
Very no good Osbad.
That's not good.
Because he had a really gnarly divorce.
Ooh.
Or kind of. I guess that's not entirely accurate. I think we've decided to do an extra episode about this story because there was just too much to include here. Mm-hmm. So if you're interested in hearing more about Osgood and his wife Mina, then you can join the Patreon. We'll have an extra episode about it.
Sounds good to me.
But I will give you the very short summary here.
Of Osbad.
Of Osbad. He had a pretty infamous and terrible marriage with a woman called Mina Amy Edwards Moss. He was awful to her, in summary.
Yep.
Really awful. I talked about his mum, Osbad's mum. They had a really weird relationship.
Oh, yeah?
Lots of documents report them being devoted to each other. She never left him alone. They could barely stand being apart.
That's weird.
It was bizarre. And like they were living together. It was only when he married Mina, it was one of the conditions of their being married that his mother couldn't live with them. And that was a condition set down by Mina's father.
I mean, that's fair.
He was like, no, if you're going to get married to my daughter, your mum can't be there.
Yeah, you can't also just live with your mum.
Which suggests that he saw some red flags.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
But yeah, he was awful to Mina. He isolated her from her family, spread lies about her mental state and her suitability as a mother to their daughter, Mary Thyra. Osgood's mother was called Mary.
Eilidh was researching and writing this, and you could have seen her face while she was reading some of the court documents and stuff.
Yeah, I went through the court transcripts for what I'll explain in a minute.
Not having a good time.
No, it was awful. I was deep in the pink cave the whole time. Eventually, Osgood and his mother attacked Mina while she was holding their daughter.
Oh no.
And Mina left, knowing that she wasn't safe living in the same house as Osgood and his mother.
Valid.
Even though it meant being apart from her daughter too, because Osgood kept their daughter.
Oh, I always think that's how you know it's bad. If a mother is prepared to leave her child.
Yeah, she wasn't safe. It was really, really awful.
Yeah.
Mina's family, who were from Lancaster down in England, they actually leased Poole House, which was close to Inverview and Turnig, where Osgood and his mother were living. They leased the house, and Mina stayed with them in Poole House and travelled back and forth to see her daughter from there.
Wow. That's wild.
And while she stayed at Poole House, Mina carved into one of the wooden banisters, which you can see if you go to visit. It's the carving's a big, long, like twisting Celtic vine, and it has Lancastrian roses all the way down it, which is where she was from.
It's quite something, because we went to see it, obviously. And the craftsmanship of it is insane.
She took years to do it. Ultimately, Osgood tried to divorce Mina, which caused a huge scandal. And he said to the courts and in his application for divorce that she had abandoned him, her daughter, and her marital duties.
It's just lies.
And he never apologised for what he did. He never took any blame. It never really admitted the truth about why he had attacked her while she was holding their baby. But the courts didn't grant the divorce because basically on the grounds that she hadn't abandoned them.
Yep.
He had made her leave.
Yes.
So he was at fault. So they didn't get a divorce.
Well,
which I know is a bit backwards.
I'm glad they didn't believe him, at least. I feel they should still get divorced, but on her terms. Well,
it would put her in a really bad position if they got divorced.
Oh, that's true. It's tricky. It's just not good.
She would lose a lot of rights if they got divorced, which also isn't fair.
No,
but I think she would have been worse off if they got divorced.
I see. I'm with you. Yeesh.
Yes, there is a lot more detail there. We're going to do an extra episode.
Yep.
If you would care to hear it.
Patreon.com/generallyspooky.
Their daughter, Mary, who also went by Mary, I saw, chose to live with her father when she was old enough to be given the choice.
Oh, no.
I'm assuming because she was kept away from her mother.
Yep, and fed lies.
But she helped him a lot with the development of Inverview Gardens.
Oh.
They had that in common. She was very passionate about it.
I'd forgotten this is the same man who did the gardens.
Yep.
Oh, no.
Yep.
Oh, God.
She was living at Turnig, which was her grandmother's old home, with her father and her husband. So they were all living together too.
Yep.
In 1914, when karma took action.
Oh, yes.
In my humble opinion. This brings us to kind of the next era of Poolyu's history. Because we're now into World War I.
Wow, we've come so far.
Yeah.
So tell me about World War I.
Loch Ewe was a really important base during World War I and World War II, which we'll get into in a bit. It was used a lot by the Navy because the loch is very deep and it's pretty sheltered. Like, I know the weather can be a bit wild up there, but the loch itself is quite sheltered from the elements. So it's a good place to have a base and run exercises.
That does actually make sense. Yep.
In 1914, unfortunately, a sailor was killed in an accident that happened on a battleship that was moored in at Loch Ewe. And during the funeral for him in April 1914, everyone noticed that there was smoke spewing from Inverview House.
Oh, no.
Which isn't what you want to see.
Nope.
The Navy men came from the funeral and helped put the fire out, but the house was completely burned down.
Oh, I was going to say, good thing the Navy was there. That's who you want on hand when there's a fire, and there's not really a fire service who could come out.
Not really.
But too little too late.
They tried to help. It just... Sometimes it happens. They couldn't do enough in time.
Fire's gonna burn, you know.
And quite tellingly, in my opinion, Osgood, Mary and her husband, they were all living at Turnig together, which was Osgood's mother's house.
Yes.
Which I think lends credence to the fact they had a weird relationship. But I saw one of the reasons they weren't living at Inverview, even though it meant a lot to them, was because they were letting it out for shooting to try and make money.
Ah, yes, yep.
It made more sense for them to rent it out than to live there themselves. So thankfully, no one was hurt, but the house completely burned down.
Yeah, that's a shame, though. Or it would be if they didn't rebuild it. I'm assuming, because it stands there today.
Oh, I don't think I said. Osgood's mother, Mary, died in 1901 when she was 89. So she was long dead by this time. The war and the start of the 1900s marked a pretty difficult time for the people who lived around Poolyou. I we've talked about it already, but it's very remote. It's very small. Not a lot of people live there. But when war came around, 135 men were called up to serve from the Gairloch parish.
Oh, and I know it doesn't sound like a huge amount of people, but it's not a big area.
Knowing Poolew and the area around Gairloch, that is a huge number of the population.
When there's a lot of physical work that needs to happen. A lot of work that would have required men to do.
Just hands.
Yeah.
Whether men or women, just as a huge chunk of the population vanished. And 64 of those men never came home. At 34 of them, I read that 34 men died from Alt Bay alone.
Oh.
Alt Bay is reasonably close to Poolew, sort of further around the coast. Tiny place. Yeah, 34 men, which would have been massive. And it had a major impact on the people left behind.
It would do. For generations. Awful.
Some people, because of this, moved to different cities for work. The people who were left didn't have a lot of money. Life was changing pretty dramatically for the people there.
Oh, it would do. Economically, let alone the trauma of losing all these people,
Right? And I swear I'm trying to keep us on track for following the history of Poole House, but it's kind of hard to do without considering the history of the whole area.
I think so.
Because it all plays a part.
You got to have the full context.
Now, World War I was pretty terrible, but World War II really left its mark on Poolew and the surrounds, because Loch Ewe became a hub for the Navy once again.
Ah, yes.
They established a base there, and it was such an important base that Winston Churchill actually came to visit, and he stayed at Poole House.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
He, quote, congratulated the crew of the HMS Ark Royal on sinking U-39, the first U-boat of the war to be sunk.
Wow.
Unquote.
That's worth the trip for.
He came up to celebrate the troops.
Keep morale up and things.
And one of the servants at Poole House was apparently so enamoured with Churchill, she was, quote, honoured at being presented with his overalls to wash. Unquote.
Doing your bit for the war effort.
Cleaning Winston Churchill's pants.
Yep, someone's got to.
I don't know if I'd ever be honoured to wash someone's clothes.
I don't know.
It'd have to be someone pretty spectacular.
Yeah. I quite enjoy the pride of work, though. Just as the housekeeper, when that's amongst your duties, to have that much pride and esteem in what you're doing and who you're doing it for. Because I don't think I would either, if that was my job.
No.
But it's nice to think that there was a time when you would. Because it's nice to be happy, isn't it?
I don't really know what point you're trying to make.
Don't just move on.
Poole House was taken over by the Navy, and officers were living there during the war. They were training new officers. No, they weren't. They were training new recruits up and down around Poolew because the conditions were so harsh. They chose Poolew on purpose. A new program of training was introduced and led by a man called Lord Roallan.
Lord.
Lord Roallan. To toughen up new recruits who frankly just weren't ready to get out there for real. Yep. They had to toughen them up.
I mean, that's fair. That would be the place to do it. Grim.
It's because, it's very remote, quite mountainous.
Weather's not the best.
Harsh terrain.
Yep.
They just fired them out.
Yeah, you just send them into the mountains for a few days to survive. It would toughen you up.
Quote, the area quickly became a strategic military base, hosting over 1,000 service personnel and transforming quiet crofting communities across the area. Loch Ewe and Gairloch were given restricted area status, and barrier checkpoints were erected at Gairloch and Eilidh.
Oh my god.
The Gairloch Hotel was taken over by the military as a hospital, and local businesses and shops adapted to serve the growing population.
Well, there you go. If you contrast that to the 134 men were taken, 1,000 arrived. That's insane.
Right?
Insane.
Further, quote, there were times during the war when military personnel outnumbered the local population by 3 to 1.
There you go.
Unquote.
That's madness.
3 to 1.
3 to 1. Criminy.
But it was the perfect place. It was the perfect place to run operations.
And there'd be plenty of space.
It's not a major target. It's not by a major city
No.
for bombs.
It'd be a long way extra to fly.
But what makes Pool U and the land around it so special during the war was the role it played in the Arctic convoys.
The Arctic convoys.
Now, I feel like you really don't hear about these convoys, which is a shame because they were super important and really fucking dangerous.
Oh, yeah?
These were convoys of ships that were basically bringing supplies to Russia during the war to ensure that they could continue fighting after Russia was invaded.
Oh, I see.
We're not going to get too into it because we'll be here forever, but it was super dangerous for the people that had to be on these ships because they took a route that went north around the Arctic. So they were sailing between Russia and Arctic pack ice. And Norway was occupied by the Nazis at this time.
Oh, even trickier.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So Hitler had invaded Russia after saying he wouldn't. So typical. And it was super important that Russia, which was then the Soviet Union, stayed in the war against Hitler. Basically because if German forces were occupied fighting Russia, that helped the other allies in different arenas of war.
Yep.
Because it divided the German army. So a lot of effort was put into keeping Russia in the war. But they needed supplies. That might be a bad explanation.
No, and
Without getting into war history, that's the best I've got.
and that makes a lot of sense.
And this was a huge operation. Absolutely massive.
Oh, would have been.
Quote, between February 1942 and December 1944, 19 convoys set sail for Russia, carrying invaluable military supplies, totaling 481 merchant ships and over 100 naval escorts. The biggest of these left Loch Ewe with 47 merchant ships, plus their escorts. It seemed to the locals that you could almost walk across the loch when they were all at anchor.
That is unbelievable to try and picture.
Right? The scale.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted just to quote that directly, because I feel like that adequately describes the scale of this.
I think if you'd asked me how many ships were in a convoy, I would have said 3 as a guess.
This was major.
That's unreal.
And it's a combination of the merchant ships and the battleships. Or like the naval escorts.
Wow, that mind-blowing.
All from Loch Ewe.
Yeah.
And even with all of that support, the journey was really perilous. The supplies were taken by the merchant navy, who were escorted by battleships and planes, which provided air support. But unfortunately, it wasn't just the enemy that the convoys had to worry about. Like I said, they were going through the Arctic.
Yep.
There are some pretty incredible photos from the journey. I'll try and remember to put them up on Instagram if you're interested. Because they had a hard time just existing on these ships going on this route. I have another quote for you if you're interested.
Yes, please.
The loss rate for Allied ships was higher than on any other Allied convoy series. The weather conditions were atrocious.
Yeah.
Enormous, violent waves bombarded the ships. The gales were fierce and it was bitterly cold. It was so cold that when waves landed on board the decks, they would freeze to the ship.
Oh, God.
De-icing the ships was a constant necessity because if the ice was allowed to build up, it could make a ship top-heavy and capsize.
Oh, no.
If a ship was sunk, anyone who went into the sea had a life expectancy of roughly 5 minutes.
Oh, that is about as bad as it gets, isn't it?
That's what they were up against.
Oh.
And then you have the enemy planes, ships on top of that.
Yeah, and then there's people who don't want you to do what you're doing. That is, oh my gosh.
And you never hear about it.
Unreal. No, that was brand new information until we went on the tour.
Right.
No, when we went on the tour.
I also read that there were catapult aircraft merchant ships.
Catapult aircraft merchant ships. Are those the ones that like fire planes off the deck?
Yes. So their purpose was literally catapult planes into the air from the decks of the ship.
Oh my God.
They had rocket-propelled catapults on them. that fired planes into the air.
That's...
Because they couldn't use a normal runway.
No.
Because the conditions were too rough. So if the ship is rocking, is there a word for that?
Rocking, I think.
I'm motioning my hand like a hypnotist at Kieran.
Whatever you say.
But the deck isn't balanced, so you can't take off from there. So they just fired them into the air.
I actually thought that was a newer technology than World War II. Because I've seen clips of modern day aircraft carriers doing that.
I mean, they've obviously developed. But
yeah, but even still,
they were doing that then.
That's really cool.
From the Arctic.
From the Arctic. Hope your catapult doesn't freeze.
4 million tons of supplies were brought to Russia via the Arctic convoys.
Oh my god. That's heavy. Especially when it's all going to be like bombs and bandages.
Well, food.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense as well.
They just had to keep Russia in the war. I think they were giving them just... I say Russia, but it was the Soviet Union then. I'm trying to be accurate. They just had to keep them in the war. So I think they were sending them everything. Everything they could spare.
I guess so.
And that was all based up in Pulju.
Unreal. I'm not even sure how you get 47 ships worth of... or just 47 ships to pull you in the first place, let alone then taking those ships through the Arctic.
And yeah, locals said that it looked like they could just walk across the loch.
That'll be the postman.
So the main reason I bring up the Arctic convoys is because it's super interesting.
Obviously.
But also, Pool House ended up becoming the headquarters for the whole Russian Arctic convoy campaign.
Wow.
All of the officers were there. It was the headquarters. That's where they ran everything from.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's really cool. All comes back around. See? Amy's got a plan over there. She knows what's up.
And it was the base for like several other things as well, like the new recruit training that Lord Roallan was running. It was based at Pool House too. It's a pretty big place.
Yeah.
So there was room and they needed all the space they could get. So
if you've got 3 times the population suddenly there, or 3 times the population on top of the population suddenly arrived, they're going to need somewhere to stay.
Yeah. But yeah, Pool House was where it all happened. It all came together.
And even if you're Winston Churchill, you need somewhere to get your pants washed.
Right? You don't want to stink. Stinky boy.
That doesn't inspire anyone.
That's why I call Odin a lot. He's a stinky boy.
Him and Churchill.
He's a stinky boy. Unfortunately, disaster struck Loch Ewe in 1944.
Oh no.
On the 26th of February, the SS William H. Welch had left London on its way to New York. This is a big ship. And was stopping at Loch Ewe on the way as part of the route. If you're familiar with the Highlands in February, you can probably anticipate the problems facing this ship.
Yes.
February, I feel like, is a particularly rotten month.
It's very hit or miss.
Yeah. It can either be lovely or it's absolutely heinous.
Yeah.
I feel like you don't get it in January as often. I seem to remember lots of Februaries where it's just been brutally bad weather.
Just seems especially stormy. That is the middle of winter, I suppose. Yeah. February.
But you know what I'm talking about.
I do indeed.
There was a terrible storm on the 26th of February 1944. The ship was trying to enter Loch Ewe. Like I said, it's a sea loch, so you can turn into it just from open water.
Yep.
As the ship turned to enter the loch, the wind and the waves started hitting the side of the ship, which is called broaching.
It is.
Which I never knew. Learning. And basically, if you're like me, you don't know anything about ships. When this happens, it's very difficult, sometimes impossible, to steer the ship because you have everything hitting the long side of the ship and you just lose control. And I read that it would have been even harder for the William H. Welch to regain any kind of control because the holds were empty at this point. So it was just being battered around by the weather.
Not enough weight to hold it in place.
It can't really do anything. It's just being tossed around.
Yep.
At 4:20 a.m., the ship hit a reef in the loch. Got completely stuck on this reef. And it's stuck on the reef, but it's still being hit with the stormy winds and these huge waves, absolutely battering the ship, with all of the men still on board. They can't do anything.
Like rattling a can of sardines.
Kinda, yeah. The captain had ordered everyone to go to the bridge, the equivalent of like a cockpit of a plane. It's the control center, I think. It was the only reasonably safe place because it was the ship's highest point.
Yeah.
So, not safe, but the safest.
Well, you can't get off.
No.
So
they're the furthest away from the water.
Yep.
Yeah, so all of the crew with the captain are all in the ship's bridge.
Yes.
Pretty stuck for what they can do.
Yes.
They fired flares to try and alert people on land that they were in trouble, and a tug did show up to try and rescue the men. Would you like to explain what a tug is?
Sure.
Not the rude kind.
Funny story about that. For the blether. It's a little heavy boat used to help bigger ships navigate through small spaces. So they usually get a rope tied to them and they like pull big ships into place and they can like nudge them from the sides and stuff.
Because it's easier for them to maneuver, right?
Yeah. So pretty heavy, big engine, and used just to like bumper car up against ships to like nudge them along into place and stuff.
And I'm assuming a tug might have had a better chance in the storm because it would have maybe had more weight.
More weight and just been a bit smaller so it could turn faster and stuff. Maybe more likely to capsize, but much more likely to get stuck sideways. What did you say? Broached? Broached.
I've been learning.
Yes, and we can talk about tug jobs in the blether. My pen's not working.
I mean, if you don't want to join for that, that's fine.
It's not what it sounds like.
I mean, it's Kieran. It probably is what it sounds like. So yeah, a tug did come to try and save the men on the boat. But the conditions were so terrible that they couldn't get anywhere near it.
Well, that's kind of what I assumed. Like, they'd fired the flares and people would see them. But if it was that bad, they'd be like, we can't help because we'll die too.
That's pretty much what happened. But they did try. They did go out on the boat to try and save the men. But they did everything that they could.
That's fair play.
So I don't want it to sound like they saw and just went, no, because that's not the truth. At 6 a.m., about 90 minutes after the ship hit the reef, it broke completely in half because of how hard the wind and the waves were.
Yeah.
It couldn't withstand the force. The half that had the bridge stayed stuck on the reef.
That's fortunate.
So it didn't float away like the other half did. But the men are still stuck.
Yep.
And arguably in a more dangerous position now because the ship isn't sealed.
Oh, they've only got half a ship.
Yeah.
Not good.
Navy men stationed in Pulu, like I was saying, and lots of the locals who saw the wreck and then the flare rallied to try and save the men trapped out in the loch. But there was literally nothing that they could do. They could just watch.
Well, that's the horrible part, isn't it? You're just watching it helpless.
But lots of people ready to help however they could. It seemed like a pretty horrific scene. So if you think this is going to be triggering in any way, I'd maybe skip ahead a few minutes because it's pretty gnarly. People on shore were watching the men getting washed from the bridge of the ship just into the water.
Yep.
And they got things ready on shore to receive them. So they had fires burning, they had blankets, they had flasks of tea. They had everything ready to receive them, but many of them weren't making it. Some of them were drowned because the conditions were so poor. Some of them were washed against the rocks and the cliff faces and were killed that way, which the people on shore saw happen. Awful.
Not good.
No.
I'm surprised any of them made it back, honestly.
Out of the entire crew, which was 74 men, only 12 survived.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, it was truly terrible.
Yep.
Especially because it happened in safe water. Well, they weren't hit with a torpedo.
Yeah.
They weren't in battle. It was just a really bad storm. A newspaper article was written using the reports and the thoughts of some of the survivors. And here's some of what it said. Crofters, poorest of poor Highlanders who eke out a meagre existence on tiny, bleak farms, This was written by an American, by the way.
I was just wondering.
Left their stone huts in the howling winter weather to help the American sailors they learned had been flung upon their jagged coast.
Stone huts.
They were stone houses.
Yes.
With thatched roofs. Or some of them. I think some of them might have still had thatched roofs. Or tin roofs.
Yeast.
Because I think Granny's house that she grew up in had a tin roof, but I might be making that up.
Say one more. Couldn't tell you.
Regardless, stone houses, I think, were still a thing. First, they carried jugs of hot tea that represented weeks of rations, through hail and sleet and over miles of rocky moors. Finding the few still alive, they made driftwood fires to revive the men exhausted by their battle with the sea and the cold. They carried blankets from their own beds to wrap around the frozen survivors. For hours, the crofters searched the beach and cliffs, seeking men whose clothing had been washed from them and who had crawled into caves for shelter from the pounding surf and wind.
Oh.
They lowered one of their men into a crevice to haul out a seaman given up for dead and managed to revive him. At least 2 of the survivors are alive because the crofters refused to give up their search and restorative efforts after all hope seemed gone.
Oh my God.
Second Assistant Engineer George L. Smokovich was among the few still alive when cast on the cliff. He relates that, covered by a protective coat of fuel oil, he swam from the cliff, hoping to be picked up. But he was washed back and found there by 2 old women who carried him 4 miles to their little farmhouse.
Oh my days. A protective layer of fuel oil.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if it just helped insulate him from the cold.
I wonder. Mm-hmm. Grim.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah. I'm just thinking if he was covered in the fuel oil, the waves hitting him wouldn't penetrate.
That's true. Or possibly the wind wouldn't be as bad either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was awful.
Yeah. Not good. Not good at all. But fair play to the people of Poolew.
Mm-hmm. And something I'm sure has stuck in their minds for a long time afterwards.
Yes.
Because you wouldn't forget that.
No, you would not.
And there are like other villages and things like near the loch. It's not just Poolew. To be clear. It was the combined effort of a lot of people.
Yeah.
A funeral was held for those who were lost in the disaster. They were buried in Scotland rather than taken back to the US. They were buried in and around Loch Ewe. And there's a cairn memorialising them that's still there.
Well, that's nice.
And the wreck of the William H. Welch is still in the loch.
It's still there?
Not like visible. You would have to go underwater, but you can still see the wreck.
Oh my God. I had no idea that was there.
Yep.
I mean, why would it get moved?
I mean, there's not much you can do, really.
No. Unless it was for like salvage, you wouldn't need to. Yeah. That's not even the spooky part of the episode.
Nope, but we're about to get there.
Oh shit.
All that is to say, the war effort in and around Poolew was pretty massive.
Yes. It happened not just on the front lines, didn't it?
But now I'm going to refocus for the billionth time on Poole House.
Well, that's what this episode's about.
I know, it's hard to remember sometimes. I don't know why I'm like this. Because we're about to get to the many, many hauntings and ghost stories.
Oh, yeah.
In the 1950s, Poole House was sold to the Hughes family. So the Mackenzies didn't own it anymore. The Hughes sold it to the Harrisons in 1991.
Once it was no use to them.
Do you have like a list written down? Or?
Nope, straight off the top of the old noggin. There's so few other thoughts in there, it leaves room for them.
Not a single thought in that head. And the Harrisons are the couple that still own the place today. Margaret Harrison had her fortune read before they bought Poole House.
Oh.
And she was told that they would leave their home down in England in favour of, quote, a white house on a corner with water around it. And given a, quote, metal fish token by the fortune teller, which she said was connected to where they were going to live.
Okay. That's just vague enough. I like it.
When Margaret and Peter visited Poole House to view it, they realised when they were back at home that it met a lot of the criteria of the prophecy that Margaret had been given. It was a big white house. right on the edge of Loch Ewe.
It is.
And was being marketed at the time as a fishing hotel.
A fishing hotel specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Kinda spooky, must be fate.
Must be fate. Couldn't be coincidence, that's for sure.
During their time as owners, they ran it as a luxury high-end hotel. So a pretty far departure from wartime and before.
Yep.
Where tenants were farming and it was an inn.
Apparently Brad Pitt stayed there.
Lots of famous people stayed there over the years. The Princess Anne, Brad Pitt, I forget who else.
One of your dad's friends.
Kate Winslet. One of my dad's friends, his old boss, he stayed there. Yeah, a whole host of people. It was very luxurious as I understand it. But it doesn't operate as a hotel anymore.
Bougie.
But you can take tours around the house during tourist season.
That's so interesting, Eilidh. Maybe we should find ourselves in one of those tours.
Well, you know what's interesting, Kieran, is that we already did.
Oh, my memory, eh? What am I like?
So now we're at the present day. And I appreciate you sticking with me for quite a lot of tangents that weren't really about the house at all. But I feel like contribute to everything.
I think so. Context is important.
Yes. Now, I might try and do something a little bit different with this spooky section of the episode.
I'm scared.
Because I kind of want to take you, the listener, on the journey that we went on while learning about the house. Because for once, Kieran's been there pretty much since the beginning. So he's known all of this, or most of it.
I have.
It really feels like a journey.
It has been quite a journey. Well, that sounds pretty fun.
Yeah.
I think.
Happy for me to go for it?
I think so. I will need, led and guided, but I'm here with you.
Well, I was looking at ideas for potential season 6 episodes. I have a big master list of ideas that I have gathered over the years now. And Pool House caught my eye on this big master list. It's one that I've had kind of on the periphery for a while, but haven't really looked into. So I decided to have a little glance and see if it's something that would fit for our spookiest season ever. I looked into it a little bit deeper, and I came across an article in which the daughter of the owners, Liz Miles, was talking about some really strange things that happened to her while she stayed overnight at Pool House. And I was immediately intrigued and knew that this had to be an episode. Because this article was effectively like a can of haunted worms. For me.
And it was open and there was no shutting it.
No. So I'm going to read you a little bit from it. It was written by Susie Macaulay for the Press and Journal. Don't you know?
The P&J, if you're local.
Yes. Confusion. Screaming. Running. Doors slamming. The bed lifting. The sound of something huge banging into the wall. Above all, a feeling of absolute terror and panic. Especially when one elderly gentleman ran screaming from the room in question in the middle of the night, fell down the stairs, and later died of his injuries.
Oh no.
Liz Miles was heavily involved in the running of the hotel, so they're talking about Pool House. She was deeply sceptical of the guests' claims until she decided to sleep in the room herself. So now it's Liz talking. So it was November, and I woke up between 2 and 3 a.m. hearing this racket. I could hear the doors, the feet running, and people screaming. At first I thought, what on earth is going on? Then I thought, hang on a minute. It's November. We're closed. There's no one here. So I fell out of bed and shot to the door, opened it, and it was absolutely silent. I thought I must have been having an incredibly realistic dream. I shut the door, went back to bed, and it started again. I knew I wasn't dreaming. I was awake, so I put the light on. The noise in the corridor was still going, doors slamming really loudly, and the next thing I heard was this enormous crash against the wall. I honestly thought something was coming through, and as soon as that stopped, the bed started to move, with me in it. That was it. I was out of there. It was exactly what other people had described, but obviously so much worse when it's happening to you. Very unpleasant. During the retheming of the hotel rooms in 2020, the family decided to theme the small but horribly and allegedly haunted room as a children's bedroom and placed in it a number of vintage toys, including dolls from the early 1900s. After that, the unexplained activity in the room began to ramp up to new levels. Remember, no one stays in the room these days, and it's only ever visited by tour groups, like us.
Like us.
But staff say they now find the dolls have been moved from their original places, lying on the floor, shoes off, hair unpleated, just as if a little girl had been playing with them. But quite apart from the Titanic horror room, it appears there could be many other spirits in Pool House, hiding jewellery, playing the piano, or appearing very solid, as if on a loop, crossing the hall and disappearing into what is now a cupboard. So this was the very first thing I ever read about Pool House.
It's a strong opener. Like, you can't hear that and not go and visit.
I was immediately intrigued, because Liz sounded like she had a fucking nightmare. In that room, it sounded awful.
She was living your nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like 2.5 hours away from us, so that's enough. That's close enough to go and see.
Yeah, so I was intrigued.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really wanted to explore a little bit more. So you can see why I was intrigued.
Obviously.
Basically.
Who wouldn't be?
Especially with the fact that it's so close to us.
Mm-hmm.
I was tempted. Sounds like a pretty classic haunted house.
Doesn't it?
Hearing all of the noise of people running and screaming.
Footsteps, bed shaking, door slamming.
All of that. And Liz couldn't explain it. And as a result of what she experienced, the room was never let out again. No one sleeps in that room at all anymore.
Mm-hmm.
After what she experienced. Now, you might have noticed, like I did, that at the end of the article, they referred to this haunted room as the Titanic Horror Room.
I did notice that, which is, I know why, but I was wondering, did they give it any context?
Well, there's a reason for this, which I'm going to get into. They do talk about it in the article, but I'm holding it back for dramatic effect. Pool House is chock full of antiques. Full of them. Mm-hmm. There's so much to see if you go to visit, because there's so much in every room. And they have a pretty large number of antiques or replicas of things from the Titanic, the ship. Mm-hmm. Margaret Harrison was a smith before she got married, I believe.
Yep.
And her father's cousin was a man called Edward John Smith.
Not a blacksmith.
No. No. A Smith surname.
Yes.
Her father's cousin was Captain Edward John Smith.
Oh, and what perchance did he captain? He asked leadingly.
He's a pretty famous guy. Some of you listening might have heard the name and gone, hang on, I know that name.
I didn't, obviously.
No, obviously. And it's because Captain Edward John Smith was the captain of the Titanic.
Oh, my days.
Way back in 1912 on its disastrous maiden voyage.
I mean, it's impressive, but also, poor show, man.
Well, I looked into him a little bit so that we can talk about him. Mm-hmm. He worked at sea since he was 13.
Goddamn.
And started working for White Star Line, which is the company that owned the Titanic, in 1880 as a junior officer. So he worked his way up.
Over 32 years? Mm-hmm. Fair play.
And he commanded his first ship back in 1887.
Wow.
And he served in the Boer War.
Double wow.
So this is a man who has experience.
Mm-hmm.
He captained the Olympic in 1911, which had been the biggest ship in the world at the time, and was also owned by White Star Line. It was kind of like the sister ship to the Titanic. Mm-hmm. But he was the captain when it collided with the HMS Hawke. So there was a collision with another ship.
That's not a good reputation so far.
Although thankfully no one was seriously hurt or killed.
Good.
During this collision. Edward was planning on retiring after he had captained the Titanic on this voyage to New York, which didn't happen. He went down with the ship, apparently calling for lifeboats to come back and pick up more survivors, which many of them did not do, even though they weren't at capacity.
That's bad.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if any of the lifeboats were actually full.
They weren't full? No. Oh my god. I haven't seen the movie even, so I don't know much about the Titanic.
Yeah, I'll get into it, the number of lifeboats, because that becomes relevant in a minute. But yeah, many of them weren't full. And they were so keen to get away from the ship, a lot of them didn't come back.
Awful.
To try and save people who had gone into the water. One person reported seeing him at the bridge of the ship as it went down, standing at the helm as it was filling with water.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it was just out of embarrassment he decided to go down with the ship?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't think so. I think it's something I read about a bit in Kate Morgan's book. I think it's just called Murder. But she looks into the creation of the legislation about murder. So it's not, I guess it is about true crime, but it isn't. It's about how we go about defining crime, defining blame. And she talks about this concept of like honor at sea. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, actually.
I think so.
Talking about these men who were stranded in a boat and they ate one of the other men. And then they survived and came home. So then it's about dealing with, well, they killed someone.
Yep.
What are the rules? I feel like this kind of comes under that there is no legislation ordering a captain to stay with his sinking ship. But many do.
Well, it's a phrase. The captain always goes down with his ship.
And it's a matter of honour. Because I feel like if it was like the Concordia, that's the cruise ship that sank, captain was fucking out of there.
Yeah.
And he was utterly shamed because people died. But he just abandoned ship. But there's no rule that says he has to stay.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. I would love to talk about it in more depth.
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it?
Like, in mid-episode probably isn't the time.
No.
So Captain Edward went down with the ship. Blame was bandied about after the fact, suggesting that Edward had ignored warnings about icebergs in the area that he had received from other ships. Or he was blamed for the fact that the ship was going too quickly. It was going faster than it should have been, but ultimately he was cleared of blame posthumously. The disaster was deemed not his fault.
Okay.
He had actually been incredibly popular as a captain. He was known as the millionaire's captain because all the rich people who sailed on the ships that he captained loved him.
That's funny.
And thought he was just amazing.
It's kind of nice.
And ultimately, even if it was his fault, he paid for it.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Along with 1,517 other people.
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. I don't know.
Yeah. So, Pool House has lots of items with links to the Titanic because of this connection in the family. And I also read there might be a family connection to the valet? Like personal servant of Joseph Bruce Ismay, who was on the Titanic that night.
Oh, wow.
And the valet died on the Titanic. He didn't survive. Ismay is a pretty controversial figure in Titanic history. Would you like me to tell you a little bit about him?
Yes, please.
He was the chairman and managing director of White Star Line and was on the Titanic the night it sank.
Oh, wow. I mean, you would be. It was an important trip.
Lots of the stories that claimed that Captain Edward was going faster than he should have been included details that claimed that Ismay was pushing him to sail faster than he should because this crossing of the Atlantic would then be a new record and would look really good on the Titanic's maiden voyage, which ultimately would look good for White Star Line.
There is sense in that.
Varying reports as to whether or not that's true, but that's one of the stories that went around after the fact.
Super interesting.
Ismay was the one responsible for lowering the number of lifeboats that the Titanic had on board.
No.
From 48 to 16, which was the minimum allowed.
No.
He did that.
I bet he was on one too.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. He was smeared in the papers afterwards because he survived. He was in one of the lifeboats that managed to escape. And you have this concept of honour again because the papers painted him as a coward. Stories run rampant that he disguised himself as a woman because it was women and children first. Other stories said that he jumped in the first lifeboat he could. He didn't care about anyone else, even though he was the man in charge, sort of after the captain.
Yep.
He didn't go down with the ship. So there's this direct difference between the two men.
Yeah.
And it didn't help that Ismay was in a lifeboat with a man called William Carter, whose wife divorced him 2 years after this disaster, claiming that he had abandoned her and their children to save himself.
Oh, that's bad.
She claimed that in court.
Oh, no.
And Ismay was in the lifeboat with this man.
Oh. That's not good company to find yourself in.
Mm-mm. To be fair, other accounts suggest that Ismay helped other people into lifeboats first. A difficult task because a lot of people were unwilling to leave the Titanic and get into a lifeboat. Some of them didn't really understand what was happening. They felt they'd be safer on the Titanic. So it was a hard job trying to convince some of them to leave.
Yeah.
And then Ismay got into the last lifeboat when there were no other passengers around who could take his place.
I mean, I can see which version of the story he'd like.
Well, yeah. Because ultimately he survived.
Yeah.
But one of the prevailing arguments was that he was a man in a lifeboat when so many women and children perished. Some people just couldn't get past that. On that night, 80% of all men on board were killed, compared to 25% of women.
Whoa. That's unreal.
And there were men who were pulled off the lifeboats and forced to stay behind in favour of women and children getting the seats. So for him to have been saved, it was a big deal. And the public didn't take... I'm trying to explain the culture that means that wasn't taken very well.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And it was especially bad because he was the chairman of White Star Line.
Yep.
So not only did he survive when women and children died, the blame was dropped directly at his door for the ship sinking.
Yep.
And then haunted him for the rest of his life.
As it should have. No remorse for him from me. It's not good. It's not good.
So from what I read, Liz and her family are related to the valet of this man,
yes,
not Ismay. And the valet died that night.
Yeah. And the captain, which is why there's lots of Titanic stuff.
Yes.
In the house.
Yes.
Which was really cool to see, actually. I really enjoyed seeing that.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I feel like anything to do with the Titanic always evokes such an emotional response from people. Like, I get it completely. I think everyone has it. I had a period of time as a kid where I was just obsessed with the Titanic.
Yeah.
Once I learned about it. And I think it's because there's so much injustice and emotion about the way it was handled and what actually happened. For example, 68% of people on board were killed, when 53% could have been saved in lifeboats.
Ooh. That's not good odds.
And 39% of first-class passengers were killed, compared to 76% of third-class passengers. So I feel like with all of that emotion about it, or all that injustice about it, it evokes very strong emotions.
I think so. It's hard not to feel something when you hear about it.
So with all of that in mind, Liz has her terrible night in the haunted bedroom.
Yes.
After hearing guests complain of experiencing similar things, she goes to try and debunk it and experiences exactly the same thing. The running, the screaming, the bed moving. Here's more of what Liz said in that P&J article.
Hit me.
An engineer was visiting and he approached me saying, I don't want to be weird or anything, but I've got a gift where I sense things and there's something going on with that room. Talking about the haunted bedroom.
Yep.
He told me, this is Liz, his daughter is very disabled and bedridden, but is a very gifted, or perhaps cursed, medium. She doesn't need to visit a place, all she needs is a photo. He asked if he could send her a photo of the room on his phone. So Liz agrees.
Quite right.
She said, with our Titanic links in the family and memorabilia, we have acted as a lighthouse or a beacon for people lost in the Titanic, including children. What guests were hearing is the extreme panic and confusion of that night. We don't know why the activity takes place only in that room, but now that the toys are in it, it seems to be attracting the children lost at the time. She said it's just a very sad situation. She picks up a strong sense of confusion with the children. They seem to know that they're deceased, but they don't understand why some children were saved and they weren't. What she came up with explains the panic, and the bed moving, because the ship was filling with water and it was floating. The loud banging was the furniture moving and crashing about. So what do you think about that?
Oh, it's a compelling story, for sure. And
extremely emotive.
Yeah, and Liz told us that story on the tour.
Mm-hmm. In the room.
While Eilidh was freaking out.
In the room. I did not enjoy it, but not because Liz did a bad job.
No.
We can talk about it later.
Yeah, a wild story. Mm-hmm. And it's a very compelling link in things. It's just I don't believe these things, so I don't believe there can be a lighthouse for the emotion. But as like a narrative story, flawless.
Would you watch the movie?
The Titanic.
Oh, that movie, yes. But if someone made a movie, if you like the story of this haunted house, with the haunted room, would you watch that movie?
Absolutely. And if this were to happen in a scary movie, it'd be top notch. It'd be top notch. So 10 out of 10 for spooks. But just once mediums are involved, I'm out.
It is a tough point for you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it doesn't help. I tried to get in touch with a medium and he ghosted me.
Right.
So I don't even have that to fall back on. I should say, as a side note, if anyone is a psychic or medium and is interested in working with us for anything, let me know.
Let's bring it on.
That's Kieran saying that. I'm much more respectful.
Yes, I think that's why nobody wants to do it.
Probably. Maybe the medium I was trying to speak to heard you and was just like, nope.
No. Liz was completely compelling. Like, I have no doubt in my mind that she believes that's what happened to her.
Well, it was interesting hearing her speak because a lot of the time she was talking as someone who doesn't believe in this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was talking about this thing that happened to her. And there was a lot of times where she was just kind of shrugging and just like, I don't know.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
I can't explain it any further than it happened and it was awful.
Yeah, and at one point during the tour, she used a phrase where what she needed was to be able to say she's a ham sandwich and doesn't normally notice these things.
Yeah.
Because she was saying how she doesn't tend to pick up on things just day to day and doesn't notice things and doesn't get the weird feelings that some people report. Which was interesting to then also have had this quite wild experience.
Well, especially because she talked about it in the same manner.
Yeah.
As she was saying she doesn't believe in this kind of thing. It was the same tone and it's just very even. She's like, yeah, I can't explain it. It was terrible and I hated it. But I don't have any answers.
So what are you going to do?
She didn't try to be convincing. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very interesting idea.
Mm-hmm.
The thought that all of these things grouped together in this place with this connection could create something of a bond. You're looking at me like I'm mental.
Just listening.
Well, tell your face. You're looking at me like...
I was not looking at you like that.
Yes, you were. I think it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I quite agree. It's a unique take I don't think we've had before, looking at various haunted places.
No, well, I guess because this is more... We're going to get to the ghosts of the house in a minute. This isn't even the house yet, really. But it's more haunted artifacts.
Yeah.
Than haunted place. I guess the cursed baronet, there was the hand.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, it was the backbone, not the hand.
Yeah, that was a lie you told.
I know, why? Pass, don't know. Looking into it, because I want to do a bit of research on the Titanic to try and reason this theory.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 109 children on board the Titanic when it went down. And from what I read, 53 of them were killed.
Ooh.
And only one of them was a first-class passenger.
Mm.
And I'm pretty sure the youngest was like under a year old.
That's horrible.
So I feel like that would give credence to this theory.
Yeah. And Liz was talking about how it was her herself who would come in and have to like put shoes back on the dolls and properly have to like ram them on.
They don't fall off.
Mm-hmm.
but we'll talk about our experiences in a bit. But I really didn't like being in there.
No, you didn't. You didn't at all.
So remember, all of this was in the very first article that I ever read about Pool House.
It's a strong opener.
So I knew we had to go. And thankfully, Kieran was game.
I was. The article was a sort of lighthouse that you found yourself attracted to.
Like a moth to a flame.
Like a Titanic baby ghost to Pool House.
Do you think that'll catch on as an analogy?
I think so.
When I started researching for our visit, once we decided we were going to go, I saw that Highland Paranormal had visited Pool House too, several times for investigations. Where we're kind of the armchair spooky sleuths, they actually go out and do the thing.
Yes, they are in the field doing the good work.
Yes, while we just sit and chat. Go visit places, have cake.
I'd rather our job, I think.
The cakes were really good at Pool House.
It was a really good cake. They've got a nice cafe.
Highland Paranormal are part of the international TAPS family. And in this instance, TAPS stands for the Atlantic Paranormal Society.
Oh, okay.
If you've ever watched Ghost Hunters on TV, then you already know this group and you know what I'm talking about.
Interesting.
Because they are TAPS, I think, the people who do that show. Highland Paranormal are pretty active on Facebook, if you're interested in finding out more or following them. And Liam leads ghost walks around Inverness, which are always pretty packed, as I understand it. They sell out more often than not.
And when it's nice weather, they're taps off.
I got to speak to Liam Shand, and Lynn Reed, who is their researcher, historian, far better at what she's doing than what I'm doing currently. And we had a great chat. I wanted to speak to them about Pool House ahead of time, just to find out what they thought, how they got on, and if there was anything that we should look out for in particular while we were going to be there. I wanted to know about it. And you weren't there for this chat, Kieran.
Nope.
So I get to tell you all about it.
Yes, I'm excited to hear about it, because you didn't tell me a huge amount after the chat, knowing you'd tell me just now.
Well, I didn't want to spoil it. I wanted some of what we talked about today to be new to you.
Yeah.
When they investigate somewhere, usually they've been asked to go rather than the other way around.
That's fun.
And from what I remember speaking to them and looking into them, they never charge anything.
Oh.
They always investigate for free.
That's nice.
They run like events that, I don't want to say spectators, but like guests can come along and join them.
Yep.
That's paid for. You pay to join the event. But if they're investigating a location, they don't charge.
That's cool.
Now, before they get into anything, they do a walkthrough of the whole place. Basically sussing out what exists that might cause people to feel weird.
Oh, yeah.
Or think that something paranormal might be happening. They try to suss that out first before they investigate anything. A big part of that is going around with their EMF reader, which is their electromagnetic field reader. And they check out fuse boxes and things like that might set off a reader, because that's what it's for.
I appreciate them doing the due diligence like that.
Yeah, they go around and see if there's anything usual that will set off equipment or make people feel a bit strange. And EMF readers are it's a pretty common tool for ghost hunters. Lots
I think
of
so.
them use EMF. The McGill Office for Science and Society, who you will love, Kieran, because their tagline is separating sense from nonsense.
Superb.
They talk about the use of EMF readers, and they are not so kind. They say, every ghost hunter worth their salt will carry around an electromagnetic field meter. It's used in the belief that ghosts give off, interact with, or even manipulate electromagnetic fields, and that an EMF detector that lights up might indicate the presence of spirits. That's kind of on the level, but in the rest of the article, they are not so kind.
Yep. Well, that's just a definition, isn't
it? Yeah, for the sake of balance, they go on and say, there is, of course, no reason to believe that ghosts, if they exist, would be able to interact with electromagnetic fields in their disembodied states. That dubious idea might be traced back to a famous movie, and they claim that Ghostbusters is the reason that people use EMF detectors.
Oh, amazing.
For the sake of balance, these are the two differing opinions.
I'm going to side with the latter. obviously, as the resident skeptic.
Resident ham sandwich.
Yes.
See, I don't really know. I don't know how I feel about an EMF reader.
I just think, why would it?
Yeah, I don't really know. I'm neither here nor there. I'm not entirely convinced one way or the other. Right down the middle.
Right down the middle.
Liam and Lynn, they talked to me about the perils of using an EMF meter. And like some groups use them without realizing the very normal things that set it off.
Oh, yes.
And then that adds to I don't want to even say hysteria, but it adds to the hype around a place that it's haunted, because this was going off everywhere. But quite often they'll go in and they'll see these points that should make an EMF meter go off for normal reasons. And they like clarifying these before they go into any depth. And
that makes good sense. Rule out the old like copper pipes, dense wiring, all that kind of good stuff.
So they do diligence.
They do.
But on this initial walkthrough, before they actually started investigating, they were getting really weird EMF readings from a massive wooden Chinese marriage bed.
Now that's unusual.
In one of the bedrooms, which they didn't really have any explanation for. It's stunning. We saw this bed.
Quite something.
Very elaborate and intricate. It's massive. But it's wooden.
Yeah, so
it shouldn't be giving off anything.
No, it will have no electrical currents going through it.
But the reader was beeping away every time they brought it close to the bed.
That's interesting, isn't it?
And then stopped as they pulled away. And they couldn't explain it. And this was before they were doing any kind of calling out or interaction. They were just walking through the building.
Unusual.
During their investigation, they got lots of strange EMF readings when they read aloud from the court transcripts of Osgood and Mina's divorce proceedings.
Oh.
Which I referenced earlier.
That's an interesting test.
They were reading aloud from it. Or before they started reading aloud, they asked Mina to reach out. They tried to communicate with her specifically because she had carved the banister.
Yes.
I think it might have been when they were standing by the banister. But they weren't getting very much. They weren't really getting much feedback. But when they started reading aloud from the court transcripts, they seemed to get activity that agreed with certain things that were said in the transcripts. Things that Mina would have agreed with.
Okay.
So witness testimony, things like that. They were getting strange readings that they hadn't been getting on their initial walkthrough.
I like that. I like that as a like test of what's going on,
Well, they have the control that they're just walking around. They're not interacting. Nothing. So it should stay consistent.
Should do, eh? Unusual.
Now, another interesting point of activity that you aren't going to like, and I know you're not going to like, because I don't really like.
Yep.
Is the use of dowsing rods.
Oh, not the dowsing rods.
Do you want to explain a dowsing rod, Kieran, just for hilarity?
Sure. Your dowsing rod is a sort of two L-shaped pieces of metal with like a long extended bit coming out, and you grab the bottom of it in your hand, and then your body heats them up and causes them to move, and now and again they cross. And they're supposed to be that you ask the ghosts to like cross the rods if they agree with something you've said. Are we speaking to Mina? And then if they cross, it's the ghost who's crossed them. And that means there's a ghost there. But it's just the heat from your hands that caused them to move because of the type of metal it is. I think it might even be two different types of metal, and that's what makes them move in each one.
Would it be different, was it like melting points, heating points?
Yeah, different, like they react to temperatures differently, so one would contract, and that would cause it to move. And that's what a dowsing rod is, and why they are nothing to do with anything when it comes to finding ghosts. This is also why I didn't speak to Highland Paranormal, so it's not just me just shitting on them.
I didn't want to subject them to you, frankly.
It's not fair, really, when they've been nice enough to speak to us.
Well, my problem is not as rude as yours. My problem is just I can't rule out human error or unwitting human interference because of body heat. That's just my opinion. I'm not trying to say anyone ever tries to do anything. I just can't rule it out. So it's not my favourite kind of evidence.
And that's right. Yeah, there's not necessarily malicious intent behind it. It's just shite.
Well, what was interesting, Mr. Sandwich, is that they were using the dowsing rods and asking questions, looking for replies, to cross them or to move them. And they weren't getting anything. Nothing at all. Nothing was happening. But when they started calling out and asking these questions in Gaelic, they started getting replies.
Oh, okay, that's kind of interesting.
Things started happening. I think that's interesting because that's something I always wondered growing up when I was watching ghost hunting shows. So many of them only speak in English, no matter where they are.
Well, it happens in Most Haunted a lot. Like, oh, there's like a little French boy. I think he's telling me this. And they're like, is he telling you that in English? Oh no, I can just understand him.
Well, there's a theory that once people die, there's sort of like a universal language. So I don't know if that means they can speak every language or just whatever they say you understand. That is a theory. I don't know how I feel about it. But I think it's interesting that they were getting more speaking in Gaelic, especially somewhere like Poolew.
Well, yeah, somewhere over on the west coast.
Up in the northwest.
There's good sense in
I
it.
think it's compelling.
I feel like a universal language is just convenient.
I don't know how I feel about it. In part, and this is sort of getting into the weeds here, but in my personal opinion, your language is a huge part of your identity.
Yes, absolutely.
So I don't know how I personally feel about the concept of that just being erased. Especially because, like here, like with Gaelic, hugely intrinsic to an entire people.
Yeah. Why would you give that up in death? Well, that's interesting. That's I wouldn't have thought to do that, even being from the area and stuff. That was a good call from them.
I think it was a very good call, a very good tactic. They did pick up some EMF activity in the Titanic room, and the Titanic room was the reason that they were called out to Pool House in the first place. And they actually claimed to have recorded a child's voice on a spirit box that they had with them.
Oh, goddamn.
I have the Facebook post, but I don't want to play it in episode because you should go hear it from them.
Okay.
So they have it as a Facebook post if you were interested. Would you like to hear it?
I would love to hear it.
Sorry for robbing you guys of the experience, but it's their content. I don't want to steal it.
Yes.
So they say they appear to get a child saying yes on the spirit box.
Hit me. Hey. That's a reenactment if you don't go and find it on Facebook.
Would you like to reenact it again?
Yeah.
So that's their claim. They picked up on that while they were there.
That's pretty.
They believe it's a child's voice in the Titanic room with all the children's toys.
I can see the connection. I can see where they've got that from. There's a little like squeak, and it's definitely like a higher pitched sound like a child. Shame it's not.
I knew you were going to do that. Well, that's their evidence. That's their belief. They were there at the time. We were not. And highly recommend you follow them on Facebook if you'd like to hear it.
Please do.
Hopefully that edits together okay. Because I feel weird not sharing it.
Yes.
In my chat with Liam and Lynn, they told me that things were largely quiet until they went up to the top floor of the building. Hearing this from them made me a little bit nervous. I won't lie. They told me that the staff really don't like it up there. They were unsettled. I don't think they particularly like being up there. They got lots of EMF activity, but they also had these cat toys with them that they use quite often. They're just little like balls, plastic. But if you touch them or move them around, they light up.
Oh.
In response to motion.
Clever.
So they had them with them. And it seemed like when they were in one of the rooms upstairs, someone or something was like holding their hand on it because it was just lit up constantly.
That's pretty creepy.
As if someone was touching it.
Yep.
And obviously none of them were. They could account for everyone in the room. No one was moving. But this cat toy was lighting up by itself.
That's very interesting. Pretty spooky up on that top floor.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
Didn't like that.
I actually spoke to them for quite a while about something called the stone tape theory.
What's that?
Well, we spoke about it in regards to the ghost of the butler.
Yep.
And this butler seems to walk around the bottom floor of the house on a loop. going about his regular business. They see him in the hall. He comes from, what room was it? So like the dining room?
I think it's like a dining room.
Yes, it was, because that's where the tour ended. The dining room, right through the hall and into one of the cupboards.
Yep.
Where there used to be like a storeroom, a pantry. And people only ever see him taking this route and walking past, and he doesn't interact. So the stone tape theory basically suggests that memories can be recorded in like the physicality of a place. So in the stone of a building.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Another leg of this was a 19th century theory that if you spoke words, they hung in the air and lingered after they were spoken.
Ah.
And some people could pick up on them and hear them after the fact.
I see.
So this was in the 1800s. This was part of the theory. But the stone tape theory is basically memories are held in a place and some people see them playing out.
Yeah. That's an interesting theory.
So it's kind of linked to the idea of a residual haunting, that ghosts are there, they're just going about their business on repeat. They don't really know that they're ghosts. They don't see you. They don't interact with you. But it repeats over and over again.
Yeah, it's just like a shadow memory.
Yeah.
That's how I think ghosts would exist.
Yeah.
I think that kind of thing.
Lots of people have sort of made a comparison between this theory and the idea of like ancient cultures revering like landscape features, like important stones, stone circles, that kind of thing.
Yep.
They put lots of importance in these places, and these places have memory.
That's interesting.
Don't feel like I've explained this very well. But the theory does kind of suggest why some places might be more haunted than others.
Yeah.
And why some people see the same things or the same thing happens over and over again.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed that more than like an object, and then you can take the object. Or just that the ghosts can just go wherever they want. Like they can just pop up in a random place, haunt it for a bit, and then leave and go somewhere else. That doesn't make any sense to me.
I think it's unusual in this case, but I could understand if something terrible happened somewhere. It would leave a scar of sorts. And somewhere would just always feel a little bit off because something really horrible had happened.
Yeah.
And I understand that that might just be having the knowledge that something bad happened there that makes you feel strange.
Yep. It's interesting though, isn't it?
Yeah, but you're intrigued by it?
Yeah, I'm quite intrigued by that. I like that.
One last thing I found interesting after speaking to Liam and Lynn was how important they found the idea of visiting a location multiple times to get a more accurate reading or more accurate information.
Thank you.
Which I wholeheartly agree with.
Yes, absolutely.
I think they visited Pool House 3 times. And it's the problem I've always found with ghost hunting shows, whatever. They spend 6 hours somewhere and that's it.
Yeah.
It's not enough. Like, scientifically, that's not enough.
No, it's not enough. It's not enough data.
And I know we had the converse problem with Balakan House, that they spent months there.
Oh, that's true, eh?
But I feel like there's some sense to that.
Yeah, I like that because it rules out a lot of environmental things if you go like different times of the year and stuff.
And Highland Paranormal have visited Pool House multiple times, and they've had different things happen every time. And on some of them, it's things that should have been consistent if there was a reasonable cause, I guess.
Oh yeah, so like the EMF from the bed, if that happened every time.
There might just be something there they don't see.
Yeah.
But a lot of things weren't consistent.
Yeah. I like that. I like their due diligence. They are putting the work in to do it properly.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
We closed our chat because Zoom started shouting at me, and we had to end things pretty sharpish. But one of the last things that they said to me was, going once isn't enough. You'll be overwhelmed.
Oh, shit.
Which was very ominous, but they said it while they were smiling and said lots about how generally the atmosphere of Pool House was really friendly and really pleasant.
I would agree with that.
They said like not to worry, but like they've experienced a lot there. But I was worried.
Don't worry, but do worry.
Cut to a few days later, Kieran and I are on our way to Pool U.
Yep.
Which is where, Kieran's going to be able to chime in and put us out of our suspense.
I feel like you're going to be disappointed. Because, well, it's the same thing before where I tell you, like, oh, this happened, it's no big deal. And then you're like, yes, that is a big deal.
Well, before we quite get there, Liz was so nice.
Yes, she was.
She's the one that led the tour, which I highly recommend. She took 2 hours taking us around the house, and it yielded some interesting experiences for us both, which has never happened. She talked about several legends that are associated with the area, not just things that happened at the house. I'm not going to go into detail here because that wouldn't be fair. Like,
Yeah.
You should really take the tour. But I'll give you a little snippet, a little sneak peek.
It's once a week they do a spooky tour rather than a history
Thursday
tour, which is what we did.
So yeah, if you want to hear the full thing and enjoy Liz's storytelling, you should. So I'm not gonna retell them here. But we heard about the witch living on Stornoway, who helped some stranded sailors return to the mainland.
Yep.
But one of them was incapable of following basic instructions and brought a hurricane back with his boat.
One of my favourite stories.
We also heard about a boy who lived and worked at the old smithy that used to be beside Pool House, who got a hell of a fright when he had a vision of disaster, which turned out to be an omen, not just a hallucination, because he predicted a really big storm, which was documented and landed on the 3rd of October, 1860.
Crazy.
Second Sight is super interesting, and there's so many reports and stories about it in Highlanders.
Yeah, that was mentioned on the tour as well.
Super interesting.
It's almost just like a normal thing up there, or it was not that long ago.
Wild.
Very wild.
The very first story that Liz shared was about Francis Mackenzie, who was the last Lord Seaforth, who we've talked about before.
In the Bran Seer?
Yes. He suffered from scarlet fever as a child and seemed to have a really terrible vision or nightmare about a hag killing all of his friends and classmates in the hospital ward they were all in. But all of the children that he saw set upon by the hag did actually die.
Yeah.
And the result of Francis having suffered scarlet fever seemed to fulfill a prophecy made by Connich Orr, the Bran Seer, who said, "The line of Seaforth will come to an end in sorrow. I see the last head of his house, both deaf and dumb. He will be the father of 4 fair sons, all of whom he will follow to the tomb. He will live careworn and die mourning, knowing that the honours of his line are to be extinguished forever, that no future chief of the Mackenzies shall bear rule at Bran or in Kintail." Francis had 4 sons who died before he did. He was deaf as a result of scarlet fever, and later in life became dumb as a result of poor health.
Crazy.
That's why we've talked about Francis before.
Yes.
In the Bran Seer episode, if you're interested.
Way back when.
An idea has come to me. Wouldn't it be wild if we read through more of the Bran Seer's predictions and he made some kind of prediction about the podcast?
Ooh, that would be pretty wild, wouldn't it?
You're reading through all these prophecies and you find one about yourself.
Oh, ooh. That would be amazing. I would love that.
It's another film right there.
That is a film. That's the generally spooky movie.
Liz also shared many stories about the ghosts of Pool House. We heard about the woman who's been spotted out the windows of the upper floors. She has red hair, and people often claim that they feel her when they can't see her.
Creepy.
Yep. Or feel her touching them in some way. We heard about how the family couldn't keep a piano in the library downstairs because it was just constantly playing by itself.
Yeah, it would keep playing itself.
So they actually had to take it out. They couldn't have one in there. And it's supposedly the ghost of a pianist who drowned in the River Yue one night. He stepped out for air, but slipped into the river. And like we said, very dangerous river.
A step too far.
But yeah, they deliberately don't keep a piano in there because it was just too loud.
Because it's just annoying.
That's how every day it was.
I've always thought that if hauntings were real and one was happening to me, it would just be super annoying. Like if every time you went to bed, you heard loud, heavy footsteps, it would just be really annoying. I'm trying to sleep. There's no danger here. The ghost can't get me. But you're being really loud and I'm trying to sleep. You're right pain in the arse.
Yeah. I would just be scared.
Yeah.
And Liz told us about the butler going about his business.
Yes.
Not paying attention to anyone. Although he's been seen wearing a mustard-coloured jacket. According to reports. Liz was a great storyteller.
Yep.
Super interesting, super entertaining. She was lovely. But it's not just her stories that have kind of stuck with us after the tour. Because both Kieran and I saw and felt weird things at Pool House. And I'm going to make him tell you. Because Kieran saw something. He actually saw something.
I freaked out, Ailey.
And told me about it like it was nothing.
It's because
it was nothing.
Well, we were on the tour. And we were going about. And it's quite confusing in there. I think she said there's 46 rooms.
43?
43 rooms. 40-something rooms.
It's a big place.
And it's like a little bit of a maze to me, but I don't have a good sense of direction. So she was telling us about something, and then we walked down a corridor. And to my right, there's a couple of steps up, and then some doorways to other rooms. I can't remember if we'd been in them. But I glanced over and saw the swoosh of a black dress disappearing into a doorway that was empty. Enough that I then looked away and went, hang on, and then looked back again. And there was nothing there, and there was nobody there. There was a mannequin beside it, so I might have missaw the mannequin, the edge of a mannequin, wearing something.
But it wouldn't move.
It wouldn't move.
It wouldn't be there and then not be there. It's a mannequin. I even know the mannequin you're talking about because it was creepy.
It was quite a creepy mannequin. That's probably why I was looking over there, actually.
There was lots of dresses and suits on display through the house, historical ones. So there were lots of mannequins, but it wouldn't move. It wouldn't move.
It wouldn't move. So, yeah, we came out and got into the car, and Liz, if you're listening to this, you did ask if anyone had seen anything, and I got too embarrassed to say I'd seen something, so I apologise for that.
If you want to tell people after the fact that Kieran saw that, I think you should tell everybody.
Yeah, that's fine, but there's other people on the tour.
Besmirch his reputation.
And I got too embarrassed to say.
He's our resident skeptic.
Yeah, so it was kind of strange.
So we went out to the car, and I was pretty freaked out at a couple of points, which I can explain in a minute. But I was psyching up to tell Kieran and to get the usual grief about it.
Yep.
And then Kieran just told me.
Yeah, I just opened the driver's side door before Hayley got in the car and just went, I saw something in there, and then got in the car and shut the door.
I was...
Just because I'm an asshole.
I was stunned. And then you told me, and it freaked me out even more. Because in quite a few different parts of the house, it just felt like someone was outside. Like if we were in a room, it felt like someone was in the hall at several different points. And I heard the rustling of a dress moving. Oh yeah,
I forgot that part.
Which I hadn't told Kieran about while we were going, because we're listening to all of the stories. You don't want to be rude having a conversation.
Yep.
I heard a dress moving, and it just felt, I kept feeling like I had to look over my shoulder, or I had to keep my eye on open doors that we'd come through, because it felt like someone was there. So to have that, and then come out to Kieran saying that he saw a dress move. Oh my God. I thought I was going to die. Thought I was actually going to die.
Yeah, you weren't coping.
Just lots of places around the house, I just had the feeling of someone being just out of sight, but watching.
It was funny to me in the Titanic room she mentioned.
Oh, I had such a bad time in there.
So there was 8 of us on the tour, I think, plus Liz. And then she ushered us into that room. We went in first. It's quite a small room, and it's packed full of toys and stuff.
It has a big bed that takes up quite a large portion of the room.
Oh yeah, I say a small room because there was 9 people in it.
And it's like a big antique bed, so it takes up more space than just on a regular one.
Yeah, so Ailey went in first and kind of stopped, and I just pushed her further into the room. And then there's people coming behind me, so I was like, okay, can you move around? And you looked at the space beside the bed, stepped in place, and then just looked back at me. So then the people tried to come in, and I was like, Ailey, you're going to have to move into the room. And you looked at the gap again, stepped in place, and then just looked back at me. I was like, no, we need to go all the way in. So we were going to the back corner on the other side of the bed, away from the door.
I was completely blocked in, hemmed in.
Yep.
I was on the far side of the bed, between the bed and the wall, behind Kieran. I was closed in on all sides. And the whole time we were in there, I was super uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was like, emanating off of you, how uncomfortable you were.
I was tense. I didn't like it. I didn't feel like anything was coming to get me or anything. I just felt super uncomfortable. I didn't want to be in there. I had the feeling of just, there's kids in here. I can't explain it. It sounds ridiculous saying it out loud now that we're home. But the whole time I was in there, I was like, there's kids in here. I want to leave. I don't like it. And I hated being completely trapped in beside the bed with everyone in front of me, between me and the door. I wanted to be right beside that door, and I couldn't be because everyone was between us. Yeah,
because I was trying to usher you in, and I think you were too scared to just like go around the back of me and like move somewhere else completely. But we couldn't get everyone in, so you had to move. You were stopping everybody coming in the room from where you were stood.
It was awful. I really didn't like it.
Yeah,
and it was no one's fault. It's just, like, to be clear, no one was making me like feel that way.
Oh, if you'd asked, you could have stepped out.
Oh yeah, 100%. But I was too in it.
You were just freaking your noggin and I'm pushing you further into the room.
I was too in it, and I couldn't say. And I should have. But I also had the feeling that someone was standing in the hallway outside.
Oh, would you want to go and stand in the hallway? Because Liz closed the door, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think so.
So you'd just been in the hallway by yourself.
After I've been like hearing things, it was unsettling. And then I really didn't like being in the bedroom up the top.
Oh, yeah.
That was where I heard the dress. It was while we were up.
While we were up on the top floor, and she was telling us about like everyone who'd stayed there over the years who'd phone down and be like, can you tell whoever's above me to like stop making noise? And they'd be like, oh sure, yeah, we'll sort that for you, knowing there was no one above them. Yeah. And electricians who went up there, and we'd talk about like loads of footsteps downstairs and like, there's nobody else here but you. But
oh yeah, there was a couple of electricians who got snippy because like, it would be nice to get a cup of tea or whatever. And then Liz having to explain, so I've been out all day. I couldn't have, sorry. You should have helped yourself. But obviously they're not going to come and interrupt people downstairs.
No.
But there was no one there. Even though they were there all day.
They were there. So yeah, so we went up to that top floor and went in. And it's kind of like a sort of suite. So there's like a bedroom, living room on one side and a bathroom on the other, I think. If I'm remembering correctly.
There was a little sewing room as well, I think.
Oh yeah.
It's a very big place.
Yeah. And we got told that there's a ghost in there who people tend to see in the mirrors, like standing behind them or like flashing past behind them.
And it's out of those windows, I think. And it's a woman that they see.
Yeah. And it was pretty creepy in that room. I don't normally get a vibe, but there was a vibe in there. Just like a vibe of uneasiness.
It was a vibe of, we shouldn't be in here.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to be in here.
Just a little like unusual, which I don't typically get anywhere.
Wild for me that you felt anything other than completely calm.
Kept checking the mirrors, didn't see anything. But it was a pretty spooky place, it has to be said.
I am more unsettled than I can explain. That I heard and felt what I did, and you came out and saw what I feasibly heard and felt.
Well, that's the fun part, isn't it?
Oh, it wasn't fun for me. It was awful.
We had two halves of the same.
I thought I was going to be sick.
That would have been embarrassing.
Especially because you said it like it was nothing. And I hadn't told you what I had been hearing or anything. So for you to say that to me completely unprompted, knowing you can't be saying it to wind me up because of what I heard, thought I was going to vomit.
Yeah, that's kind of why I said mine first. So you'd believe me. When I did see that little swoosh of dress, or, when my brain saw whatever it saw, I didn't feel particularly scared or anything. It was just that's kind of weird. It was similar, actually, I think I said before in an episode ages ago, than the shoe shop I used to work in. I'd seen people's like feet disappearing around the shelves in the storeroom. Very similar to that.
I don't know how you can say it so calmly.
So me and Liz are very much on the level with her having this like horrifying experience, being like, that was a bit weird, wasn't it? Huh. So anyway.
Wild.
Yeah.
Absolutely wild to me.
So I'm curious, I know we have listeners who do the North Coast 500. definitely put that stop on your list.
Yes, you absolutely should. Because even if you aren't interested in anything paranormal, the artifacts and the things that they have in there are fascinating.
The history.
Yes.
And the tour is great. The cafe is really nice. It's a bit quieter in Poolview than Gairloch. You could stop on both. So if you do, go on the tour and let us know how you get on.
Mm-hmm. Spooky tours on a Thursday.
Yep. But even if you do the regular tour, keep your eyes peeled. And again, apologies to Liz for not saying when you asked. I got embarrassed.
It creeped me out. But interesting, I think I agree with what Liam and Lynn said. Because it has a nice atmosphere.
Yeah.
Aside from just these moments and pockets. Mm-hmm. On the whole, it's a very pleasant place to be. Compared to Leith Hall.
Yeah, you always come back to Leith Hall as the particularly unwelcoming place.
It's stuck in my head. Mm-hmm. That sticks in my head more than Greyfriars.
So unusual.
And I was freaked at Greyfriars.
You were pretty freaked at Greyfriars.
But there's something about Leith Hall. And I feel like me saying it all the time is going to come back and bite me in the ass. Because I feel like we're going to have to go back.
Maybe.
And I don't want to.
Tell you what, I'd love to spend a night in that Titanic room.
Are you high? You would stay in there?
Oh, I'd absolutely stay in there.
With all of those toys?
I mean, I'd move the ones off the bed, but yeah, I'd stay in there.
Oh, you're insane.
I'd potentially move the dolls onto
there
lower
was lots
shelves.
of China dolls.
Always a bit creepy, China dolls. Same with mannequins. That's why I was looking at the mannequin. But generally spooking, I would sleep in that room.
You're insane.
You're insane. I want to rock the boat,
Oh. I don't think you could pay me to stay in there.
I also wish it was still a hotel, because it'd be really cool to go and stay in
it would.
Fancy bougie hotel.
It'd be a lovely place to stay. But that is the story of Pool House, and the surrounds, and the Mackenzies, and the war.
And the Titanic.
And the Titanic.
Can't forget the Titanic.
How could I? How could I forget after standing in that super uncomfortable room?
Getting spooked.
Oh.
Well, that was thoroughly enjoyable.
I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this has been a pleasant return.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about my ghost encounter?
Yes, please. I want to hear what you think about Kieran's story.
You can, I suppose you could email us at generallyspooky@gmail.com.
Yep, you can email.
Instagram. You go to Instagram messages. You go to Twitter and tweet at us, Generally Spooky and Generally Spooky History.
We're all over the place. But I am dying to know what people think about what you saw.
Yeah.
And just the fact that you saw anything. Because I feel like after 5 seasons, this is pretty momentous.
I mean, is it?
Yes.
We'll see what people think. Because you teased that I saw something and people loved it. So I hope I haven't disappointed. But that's my honest recounting of my experience.
I think it's creepy.
I wish I could have said a poltergeist picked me up and threw me against a wall, but not
ripped
yet.
Your heart out.
Not that far. If I could recount that experience, then I'm a zombie, and that's a whole other thing. So, thank you very much for being here, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you haven't before, consider rating and reviewing on your podcast player. Mm-hmm. It helps us out a bunch.
Yes, it does.
We're on Instagram all the time. We have a Patreon. That's super cool.
Mm-hmm. Loads of extra content. I want to say 14 extra episodes now.
Yeah, we have a lot.
Yeah.
There are extra episodes galore over there.
It's more than an extra season of content over there waiting for you.
And it's a great way to support what we do.
Yes, it is. Thank you for being here. And feels good to be back for season 6.
We're back next week, baby.
Yeah, we are. Bye.
Bye.